Chapter 1728. Stuck, stuck, stuck. The potion to neutralize the blue blood was actually stuck. Of all times, it just had to be drained right when he injected it into himself? Even though she had said that it was not necessarily a bad thing to lose it, there was no doubt that the Witch of Underwater City was really jealous at this moment. She was almost depressed. She could accept that she had lost the blue bloodline, but not now, but it had already happened, so she could only accept it. But the fact that the potion was stuck so casually caused the witch to explode in an instant. Who bullies people like this? You. Calm down. As if sensing Rikuji's current mood, Riaz quickly lowered his voice and reminded her, "Now is not the time to mess around. I may have escaped this time, but I may not be able to escape the next time. I know. Do you think I will rush to my death impulsively?" Rikugo glanced at Riaz coldly. "Is this guy a jinx or a lucky star? It's best that you don't." Riaz secretly sighed in relief, and then whispered, "What should we do now?" "Do what you should do. I am not your mother, don't ask me about everything." The girl snorted coldly. He subconsciously glanced at Helen. After the siren girl let out that scream, she seemed to have used up a lot of her strength. But in fact, not only was Helen's attack useless, but it also made a few of the warriors of Underwater City faint. Yes, they had fainted, and one of them even bent over with his face on the ground. Riaz did not have the nerve to say that this was a posture with his butt facing the sky. Probably because she felt that not only did she not help, but the more she helped, the more she was at a loss. The siren's howl did not work. It worked, and the fact that the warriors of Underwater City had fainted was enough to prove its power. It was just that it did not work on Konghai. I don't know, I really don't know. The confused girl now knew that she had done something wrong, and was frightened and hesitant. "Helen, Rikugo, I will think of a way to hold Mr. Konghai back. You guys take my mother and leave first." Riaz had made up his mind. Facing the powerless Lyoga, his unconscious mother, and the weak Helen, he knew that he had to stand up, and only he could do so. However, his face was pale, and the blood stain at the corner of his mouth was eye-catching. His face was covered in dust, and his clothes were tattered. His brave appearance was as embarrassing as usual. "All right," Lyoga directly nodded and walked towards Madame Kaya without saying anything else. Konghai did not plan on attacking Helen, but he clearly did not plan on letting Lyoga go. As a result, he directly attacked Lyoga. At the instant she turned around to face Madame Kaya. Exposing the younger generation to the enemy was obviously the most dangerous thing to do. This time, it wasn't a fist. Konghai's fingers instantly closed, intending to penetrate Lu Ji's body. However, at this moment, a round ball the size of a ping-pong ball was thrown out from Lyoga's palm. "I was waiting for you." The moment the sphere was thrown, a strong light illuminated the surroundings. Konghai's pupils began to change at this moment, switching to a mode where he could see everything clearly in this environment. What followed was a binding force that instantly covered Konghai's entire body. A binding device? Konghai looked down. His body was currently stuck by an extremely tough material. Lyoga did not stop the moment she threw the sphere. Instead, she directly rolled towards Madame Kaya. She directly tore apart Kaya's clothes and pulled out a magic-powered pistol from her gun pouch. She aimed and immediately fired. Bang! 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 The attack directly exploded on Mr. Konghai's body, instantly burning holes on his body. When the energy of the magic-powered pistol finally ran out, a hot breath slowly rose from the muzzle. "It's useless. You can't hurt me like this," Mr. Konghai's voice slowly rang out. Apart from his clothes, he was unscathed. In fact, he only needed to use a little strength to directly break the binding silk made of a special material. "I didn't plan on hurting you with this because there's still a gift waiting for you." Lyoga sneered and directly threw out an item with all her strength. It was Madame Kaya's belt. On the belt there were a total of 7 small spheres. One of them was an even more powerful light, directly covering a large area of the forest. The following explosion even caused a violent turbulence in the air. Lyoga's hands tightly gripped the ground, resisting the assault of the strong wind. Bright red flames had already ignited all around her. Even though she had lost her power, the development of underwater city over the years had also given her powerful weapons. She rarely used these weapons, but that did not mean she did not know how to use them. However, a figure walked straight out of the flames, completely unaffected by the flames. The girl cursed in her heart and pushed with her hands, preparing to move. However, the moment she exerted her strength, one of her palms was viciously stomped into the ground. The immense pain caused Lyoga's face to instantly contort. She grabbed her wrist, but was unable to pull her hand out. Mr. Kong Hai. His upper body's clothes had already been destroyed, only revealing his scorched skin. Kong Hai raised his palm. Arcs of electricity were gathering in the black hole in his palm. This is futile resistance. Is that so? I didn't say that I intend to rely on these to defeat him. Lyoga showed a difficult smile. These things, even the previous me could not kill him. Kong Hai subconsciously frowned and turned his head to look. He saw that Riaz had already left at some point in time, rushing in a certain direction at extreme speed. It's useless, Kong Hai said without even turning his head. Then, the attack in his palm instantly shot out. The terrifying electricity instantly struck Lyoga's body, completely charring her body. The girl fell to the ground without moving, her entire body filled with that burnt smell. Mr. Kong Hai extended his palm again, aiming at Riaz's back. In his eyes, the lock-on mark had already been formed. A flash of light instantly shot out from Kong Hai's palm. This was definitely a powerful attack. Everything was slowing down. Riaz felt it. He could already hear the sound of his heart beating. He did not even need to turn his head to feel the electricity shooting towards him. At that moment, his heart seemed to have reached a limit, as if it was about to jump out of his body. Riaz immediately twisted his body forcefully, barely dodging the electricity in his limit. It even brushed past his cheek, instantly burning half of his face to smithereens. Rumble! The electricity struck the front with the greatest force. What followed was an explosion that was at least 10 times more powerful than the weapon on Madame Kai Yu's belt. The shockwave even caused the branches to bend. Facing the gale, Kong Hai stepped forward and instantly appeared in front of Riaz. You won't be so lucky this time, Kong Hai said indifferently. Riaz knew he could not dodge, so he gritted his teeth. If you're not going to kill me and Lyoga, then just kill us. Why do you have to neutralize the blue blood in our bodies? Isn't that unnecessary? As long as the blue blood is still active, even if you die, your consciousness will still remain. That's not killing you, Kong Hai said indifferently, flicking out a needle from his finger again. I hope you really can kill me. Riaz suddenly lowered his head, giving up on resisting. He even turned his face away, revealing a large part of his neck. Clearly, Kong Hai was not someone who would not stick a needle into his body. As a result, he did not hesitate at all, jabbing his finger towards Riaz's neck again. Then, his wrist was grabbed by a huge blue hand. A huge, blue figure silently appeared in front of Kong Hai. It was the blue giant that had been sitting there motionlessly ever since it picked up the conch. This strange fellow seems to only react to those who attack it. With that, Riaz suddenly raised his head. Taking advantage of Kong Hai's surprise, he took out a small ball and threw it on the ground before hurriedly rushing away. Seeing the ball land on the ground, Kong Hai instinctively frowned. He exerted force with his arm, but with his wrist being held, he could not pull it back. Kong Hai raised his head to look at the 3-meter-tall blue giant. The giant was also looking at him, even tilting its head. So that's how it works. So this is the cooperation between you and the witch. Kong Hai frowned. Then, there was a flash of light and the ball exploded. Boom! The shockwave from the explosion sent Riaz flying. The huge shockwave sent Riaz flying far away. He landed rather wretchedly, and the moment he landed, he saw a charred body on the ground. Riaz's heart sank. He rushed to the charred body and touched it with a trembling hand. Riaz! At the same time, Helen's frail figure walked out from a tree with difficulty. The reason for her difficulty was because she was carrying the heavily injured Madame Kaya on her back. Riaz, Miss Lyoga. Helen's voice trembled. She was already considered a corpse. She even knew the result. Not dead. Riaz suddenly raised his head and said, "Her scent hasn't disappeared. She's not dead." With that, Riaz flipped Lyoga's body over and pressed his ear against Lyoga's chest, nervously listening. "Although it's very weak, it's still beating. She's not dead." "Really?" Riaz was instantly overjoyed. Then, Riaz picked up Lyoga's body and yelled, "Let's go! Mr. Kong Hai won't be injured so easily. That blue giant might not be able to stop him. Let's go!" In the forest fire. Two figures were in a stalemate in the fire. The explosion and the flames did not leave a single mark on the blue giant's body. It was the same for Kong Hai, but he still could not break free from the blue giant's grasp. Experimental subject number 15. Shepherd prototype. Kong Hai frowned. "You've actually woken up?" The blue giant seemed to have some reaction to Kong Hai's words. It tilted its head from left to right again, but there was no further reaction. "Is it because I've just woken up and my thoughts haven't completely synchronized?" Kong Hai made another judgment and there was a result. Experimental subject with a serial number required the central towers, glorious sun level, vanguards to suppress it without any damage. Without any hesitation, Kong Hai immediately made a request to the central towers, host computer. However, just like how the central tower had never been able to contact Kong Hai all these years, Kong Hai's request was directly rejected. The central towers, host computer, did not intend to take any action. Kong Hai struggled to pull out his arm, but it was to no avail. There was no hesitation on his face. He twisted his shoulder and forcefully tore off his arm. There was no sign of pain on his face. He just backed away, his eyes on the blue giant. Even after he backed away for a distance, the blue giant did not make any move. It held on to his arm motionlessly and stood still. Kong Hai turned around. The temperature of his right palm instantly rose to the point where it could melt steel. He then covered the wound on his left arm, turned around and quickly left. Suddenly the blue giant moved. It lowered its head and looked at Kong Hai's severed arm. Suddenly it blinked. Then it stuffed the severed arm into its mouth and started to chew on it. The more it ate, the more excited it became. In the end, it even held the arm with both hands and continued to gnaw on it. In the ruins of Laboratory No. 1, the pure black force field disappeared for some reason, revealing its original appearance. This was no different from what was recorded in the central tower's host computer. The host computer, it did not even know the reason why the force field suddenly disappeared, but it obviously had something to do with Luochio who walked out, but it did not ask. Perhaps it would not get an answer even if it asked. The host computer glanced at the man and woman. They were browsing the data of some experimental subjects. Experiment number 15, codename Blue Blood, 1009th experimental mutant, potential index, excellent. Miss Maid read slowly. Because it is suitable for labor, part of the genes of a blue blood was extracted and the first generation of shepherds were cultivated. So, this blue giant is actually the shepherds, the real ancestor of the Lemurians? You can say so. The host computer of the central tower said slowly, but blue blood is not stable. It is easy to get angry and lose control, and then enter the state of mutation. However, the first generation of shepherds cultivated from its cells are extremely docile and smart. Miss Maid shook her head. She swiped the data of number 15 away with her finger, and then she swiped the data of number 09. Miss Long was not number 09 here. She just accepted the power of the real number 09, Shinryu. According to the data here, the source of the power of Shinryu was the real one. Miss May just wanted to study how a Shinryu combined with the veins of Kelowna. It actually said that once Shinryu has feelings, its power will decline to a certain extent, and even its intelligence level will decrease? That's interesting. Luoqiu glanced at it casually and did not respond. Instead, he looked at the data of number 08. Number 08, codename Sin ####### PS. 4984. Chapter 1729. Riaz's mind was spinning rapidly. He was trying to find the fastest way to escape. But in fact, when he recalled how Mr. Konghai could find him so quickly, he could not help but suspect that Mr. Konghai had the ability to mobilize the Central Tower's surveillance system. What should I do? What should I do? He was no longer a child. He should not always subconsciously look for someone to rely on. But everything seemed to have returned to square one. A familiar feeling rose in Riaz's heart. Not long ago, he was like this, facing the unknown alone, when Brother Luo and Big Sister suddenly disappeared. But this time, he did not only bring Helen, but also his mother who was heavily injured and Lyoga who was dying. He felt that he could not bring them along. He was facing such a powerful Mr. Konghai, and that mysterious blue giant, and even the entire Central Tower. Until now, Riaz still could not understand why His Majesty secretly arranged for him to enter this place. Was it to make him blow the conch, and then summon such a terrifying blue giant? Riaz, I feel the existence of a lake. Helen suddenly cried out in surprise. Why don't we go into the water? I can swim very fast in the water. He could not help but recall the scene when he first met Helen. When he thought of Helen's beautiful tail, he could not help but be a little distracted. After the beautiful tail came ashore, it turned into a pair of slender legs. It was like a dream. This was the wonder and greatness of life. Looking directly into his heart, Riaz realized that the throbbing heart came from this. The dream and beauty when they first met was like a fairy tale, the meeting between a young man and a young woman. Soon, they came across a huge blue lake. It was peaceful and peaceful. It was also in this giant tropical forest, in this extremely dangerous place. Helen jumped into the lake directly. The splash was very small. She was like a drop of water merging into the lake, and disappeared from Riaz's sight in the blink of an eye. She appeared in Riaz's life so suddenly, as if it was fate's arrangement. At this moment, Riaz couldn't help but wonder if she would also disappear as suddenly as she had appeared, making all of this seem like a dream. He wanted to jump down to look for her, but he could not let go of Madame Kaya, his mother. At the same time, he could not let go of Lyoga, the girl who had risked her life to create life for everyone. Riaz did not know what was the reason for Lyoga to fight so hard. If Master Konghai's target was indeed him and Lyoga, and neither of them could escape, Riaz believed that with Lyoga's ability, she was completely capable of abandoning him and leaving alone. This way, she would be safer and her chances of survival would be higher. In fact, she did not. This was far beyond Riaz's imagination. Was she trying to protect him? Riaz had never forgotten how Lyoga had fallen to the ground absent-mindedly when Mr. Konghai injected him with the neutralization medicine. He had also never forgotten how overjoyed she was when the neutralization medicine failed. Expression could deceive a person, but smell would not. For Riaz, the smell he could smell was far more realistic than seeing it with his own eyes. Ripples suddenly appeared on the lake. A beautiful figure suddenly surfaced on the surface of the water. Helen's completely wet hair was draped over her body. At that moment, she wiped her face with both hands, making her hair smoother and calmer. The ripples of the water and the mottled light and shadow wrapped around her body, making her look extremely beautiful. That's great. I found a very good place down there. There was a smile on her delicate face. The dust and dirt on her face had been washed away. This was how she looked when Riaz first met her. At that moment, Helen extended her hand towards him and said, "Come." This was a cave hidden at the bottom of the lake. Miraculously, the lake water did not pour into this place. Instead, they found the skeleton of a strange beast, which looked like a big snake. In fact, the path of this cave at the bottom of the lake was crooked, as if it had been dug out. Perhaps it was the work of this beast that had turned into a skeleton. When they approached this skeleton, the water vapor on their bodies instantly separated from their skin and clothes, floating in the air and forming a thin layer of mist. This skeleton seems to be able to separate water molecules. How miraculous! Riaz could not help but exclaim. In this experimental site they could always encounter many strange creatures. In fact, putting aside the dangers here, this was a miraculous place like a fairyland, as if there were endless treasures to explore. The bottom of the lake was completely Helen's world. Of course, as a resident of the underwater city, Riaz was also used to moving around in the deep sea. But in fact, it was more with the help of equipment. Soon, Helen picked up some withered branches from the bottom of the lake. She brought these withered branches back into the cave. Then, with the help of the magic of the skeleton, she removed the water vapor on the branches. Riaz lit them up, bringing warm light to this cold and dark cave at the bottom of the lake. Her heartbeat is getting weaker and weaker. Her breathing has stopped. Riaz once again approached Lyoga's heart with a complicated expression. "I don't have any medicine on hand. The only thing left in the first aid kit is some hemostatic spray." He had no choice but to use the first aid kit on Madame Kaya's body, and let Helen bandage her. "Helen, do you know manual first aid?" "What's that?" "Cardiac resuscitation," Riaz quickly said. Helen shook her head blankly, but she guessed Riaz's thoughts. "You have a way to save Miss Lyoga?" "No way." Riaz smiled bitterly and said, "But now, we have to try anything." "All right, I need to see what we have on hand." Obviously, there was nothing much. There were not even many small items. Riaz did find some personal small equipment from his mother, Madame Kaya. As a high-ranking Special Forces officer, Madame Kaya did have a lot of life-saving items on her, such as the belt with 7 consecutive bursts. Unfortunately, it could not break through Mr. Konghai's defense. Looking at the small items on the ground, Riaz furrowed his brows and began to work. His hands-on ability was quite good. The young man who once aspired to become the serpent maintenance and modification master had a deep understanding of the magic technology in the underwater city. Perhaps he had not reached the level of a researcher, but his basic knowledge was quite solid. Soon, a strange object appeared in front of Helen. "What is this?" "A device that can continuously output electricity, but the output is not very stable." Riaz looked at the thing in his hand. "Let's try it." He clamped the device on Lyoga's finger, then took a deep breath, reached out his hand and pressed on Lyoga's chest. He hesitated, as if it was instinct, but in the end, the thought of saving Lyoga prevailed over the careful consideration that he could not describe. Seeing this, Helen could not help but widen her eyes. There was not only curiosity in her eyes. Riaz did not think too much, but he quickly recalled some of the knowledge that he had learned in kindergarten that he had almost forgotten. He clenched his right fist and punched the back of his left hand that was pressing on Lyoga's chest. Bang, 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 bang. A rhythmic sound rang in the empty cave. Riaz's physical strength was far beyond that of an ordinary person, so he obviously did not feel tired, but his forehead was covered with a thin layer of sweat, because he was nervous. However, the witch of the underwater city did not have any reaction at all. Because of the unstable electricity output, it even caused a reaction in her body's muscle tissue. She twitched and twitched, looking quite creepy. "You do it." Riaz gritted his teeth and recalled some of the knowledge that he had learned in kindergarten. Helen could only grit her teeth and take over Riaz's job of punching Lyoga's heart, but she was doubtful. Was this really saving Lyoga's life, and not adding more injuries to her injuries? I've done a few exercises before, and it was with Krypton. I don't remember the results were very good, so you have to make do with it. Riaz knelt in front of Lyoga and said hesitantly. Then he took a deep breath, stretched out his hand and pinched open Lyoga's lips, and then covered it with his own mouth. The siren girl, who did not know what CPR was, couldn't help but widen her eyes, and the rhythm of her beating suddenly stopped. Don't stop. Continue. Riaz turned his head and quickly said before crouching down. Helen shuddered violently and resumed the movement of her hands. She stared at this scene in a daze. The rhythm of her breathing seemed to have caught up with the rhythm of Riaz kissing Lyoga. The rhythm of her hammering unknowingly became faster, 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 faster. Faster and faster. Suddenly, Riaz suddenly raised his head and subconsciously covered his mouth with his hand. His tongue suddenly pulled out twice in his mouth, and a trace of blood flowed out from his lip. You bit me. Riaz couldn't help but get angry. Who told you to stick out your tongue, bastard, bastard? The intermittent voice came from the witch, who was lying on the ground and on the verge of death. Her eyes were slightly open, but she couldn't fully open them, and was struggling to take in large mouthfuls of air for her body. He really saved her. Helen's hands paused, and she looked at Lyoga, who had opened her eyes in surprise. Riaz really saved her. Helen quickly helped Lyoga up, but Lyoga fainted again. She imitated Riaz and hurriedly listened to Lyoga's heartbeat and breathing, and found that although her heartbeat was weak, it was much more stable, and her breathing had also returned to normal. There seems to be a very weak power in Miss Lyoga's body, and it is repairing the wounds on her body, Helen said in surprise, and then she felt something protruding from Lyoga's chest. She took it out and saw that it was a beautiful bead. But there was a crack on this bead. Helen subconsciously thought that it was caused by Riaz's strength at the beginning. What is this? Riaz came back to his senses. This is something from the sea. The little siren blinked and said, If I'm not wrong, it's a mermaid's tear. It's really miraculous. I've only heard of it before, but this is the first time I've seen it. This is a treasure that can save one's life. A mermaid will only have one mermaid's tear in her life. How do I use it? Riaz hurriedly asked. Helen thought for a bit, and then put the bead on Lyoga's lips. At this moment, a drop of golden liquid slowly emerged from the crack of the bead, and dripped onto Lyoga's lips. In an instant it completely seeped into her mouth. There seems to be some left. Helen looked at the bead carefully. Riaz, quickly let Mother use it. This bead. The effect of a mermaid's tear was truly miraculous. After using it, Madame Kai's complexion had eased a lot. As for Lyoga, new buds had begun to appear on her skin, and her breathing had become more stable and long. At this moment, Riaz was breaking off a branch and throwing it onto the bonfire. After thinking for a while, he pulled out a rather long and sharp bone from the skeleton of the beast hidden in the cave and began to polish it on the rock. Riaz, don't you regret it? Helen suddenly asked softly. Riaz was surprised and subconsciously asked, Regret what? Helen lowered her head and said, Mermaid's tear is a treasure that can heal people no matter how serious their injuries are, as long as they are not completely dead. If you meet Mr. Kong Hai again. I didn't think so much. Riaz shook his head. I only wanted to save her back then. But I naturally don't regret it now, because I've already used it, and even if I regret it, I can't go back. And, how should I put it? Instead of saying that I'll regret using such a treasure, it's better to say that I'll really be annoyed if I don't use it when I know about it. Helen looked at Riaz in a daze, and suddenly said softly, Riaz, let me sing for you. Sure. Riaz nodded without hesitation. He liked Helen's singing. In the beginning, he was attracted by her singing. She still didn't use the power of the sirens. This was Helen's original voice, and it sounded in the empty and quiet cave at the bottom of the lake, accompanied by the flickering fire. It made people feel at ease. I also like her singing. Miss Maid listened attentively. Actually, the sirens' singing is much better than using magic power. They are natural singers. Since it's rare, let's record it. Boss Luo smiled casually. Then he looked at the light screen on the other side. On the light screen, it was Long Gang, King Mojito, and the others. There wasn't much danger. From the moment they entered the central tower until they took out Iska's relic, everything seemed to go smoothly. However, it seemed that they were about to encounter something bad. Chapter 1730. The journey was quite smooth, and there was not even a little thrill. They successfully obtained the things left behind by Iska, relying on the fact that King Mojito had been seriously injured every time he explored the way for so many years. Over the years, he had obviously figured out a very safe route. It should be the same when they left, but this time, there were some problems in the central tower. Shock. An extremely large shock. The sudden appearance of the shock completely disrupted the rhythm of King Mojito. Even the red and black combat humanoids, who had fixed patrol routes in the central tower, had their fixed routes disrupted as a result. An unexpected battle broke out in an instant. The six-armed ape warriors of the Boulder Kingdom were building a wall of firepower in front of them. His Majesty, who was not afraid of battle, was clamoring to beat these combat humanoids into a pile of scrap iron to avenge the years of accumulated resentment that he was almost beaten to the point of not being able to find his way back every time he was beaten up over the years. Then, in the blink of an eye, the valiant and heavily armed ape warriors were directly flattened by even more combat humanoids. After all, they could not figure out the usage of the weapons in their hands, not to mention the principles of these weapons. But King Mojito was still brave. He jumped directly into the formation of the combat humanoid. His 6 arms waved wildly, violently tearing apart and smashing the combat humanoids one by one. We can't hold on for long if this goes on. Master Karen was standing back to back with Long Gang at this time, feeling like a hero at the end of the road. Let's find a chance to leave while Mojito attracts the firepower of these guys. Long Gang frowned and said, along the way, Mojito did not deal with us. In fact, he gave us a lot of help. Master Karen said, remember, the reason why he helped us is only for that scale. We are at most taking what we need. These apes are brave, but they are too fierce and unafraid of death. Long Gang, our mission is to liberate the people of Underwater City. Now that the great cause has not been completed, we can't lose our lives here. Master, you were not like this before. Long Gang frowned deeper. I used to be like this too. Master Karen lowered his voice and said, all of this is for the great cause of destiny. I've always been like this. Just how many of my comrades have sacrificed for me to reach this point? I can't let their sacrifice go to waste. I have what they entrusted to me. He looked into the old man's eyes without saying a word. Under that strong will to live was the stubbornness of this old man. Long Gang had the ability to sense souls, and he knew that Master Karen was someone who could disregard life and death. But that was only if it was for the sake of destiny. I'm glad that you decided to let me travel with you after knowing my identity. Long Gang sighed and said, even though I know that this is only because I still have value and can be of help to you. Long Gang, you have to know that I welcome all forces that resist the government of Underwater City. At this time, the Master quickly said, it doesn't matter even if you have half of the Siren clan's blood in you. Because in your body, you also have half of the Underwater City's blood. Forgive me, I once had a trace of doubt about you. But now I know that you are worthy for me to hand over to my comrades on the battlefield. Master, I'm not just a hot-blooded child. Long Gang shook his head. Find a chance to leave by yourself. I don't intend to leave Mojito alone like this. No matter what, King Mojito had always had a relationship with my Queen Mother. I know her character. If she doesn't approve of it, she won't show that kind of appearance in front of others. Long Gang, you have to be clear about your priorities. Don't waste your life on unimportant things. The master turned around, grabbed Long Gang's collar hard, and stared at him. Unfortunately, I think this matter is very important. Long Gang waved his hand and slapped Master Karen's palm away. He stepped back and said indifferently, Master, I think from here on out we have completely diverged. I am Long Gang, and I used to be your student. Thank you for teaching me a lot. But this doesn't mean that I need to walk into your ideal. At this moment, the 6-armed ape warriors had fallen one after another. Seeing that they were about to be broken through by the combat humanoid, Long Gang directly shot the floor under Master Karen's feet. You. Long Gang shook his head. Master, I think from now on, I can no longer work with you. The Destiny organization may continue to exist in your hands because you are used to dormant and waiting. But I can't. Go, I will buy some time and opportunities for you. Take it as a reward for taking care of me all these years. Unreasonable. Master Karen gritted his teeth and immediately turned to leave. Mojito was warlike, the ape warriors were warlike, and they were proud of dying in battle, but he couldn't. At this moment, Master Karen couldn't help but feel regret. Perhaps if he hadn't suddenly saved Long Gang this time, he wouldn't have been trapped in this troublesome place. Even the Siren tribe would have directly destroyed the Siren royal court because of the king of the kingdom's government. From the overall situation, the destruction of the Siren tribe was completely beneficial to the underwater city. In the end, he was still affected by his personal feelings. Master Karen couldn't help but feel annoyed again. That old guy, he escaped? Mojito was in the mood of killing those combat humanoids when he suddenly saw Long Gang rushing all the way to fight side by side with him. Don't blame him. He has his own mission. That is what he has been pursuing all his life. It is his wish, but it is also his sin and the shackles of his soul, Long Gang said faintly. I will stay with you. Ha ha ha. King Mojito laughed crazily at this time and said coldly, I heard that you are Iska's child? There is no accident. She is indeed my queen mother. Long Gang nodded, but I must be the child that the queen mother conceived here. Mojito said, It doesn't matter whether you are or not, as long as you are Iska's child. Listen, I will die in front of you. These words made Long Gang feel a strong sense of protection. Even if he had to die in battle, Mojito would definitely die in battle before him, guarding in front of him until the last moment. Queen Mother, Iska, is it really worth it for you to do this? Long Gang asked softly. I don't know what is and what is not worth it. Mojito said loudly while killing the enemy. I only know that I used to be the weakest one. I couldn't even walk out of the tribe to find food. I was abandoned and was about to die. Iska saved me, and then Iska made me understand. I am not a useless person. She made me the king of the Boulder Kingdom. I hate Iska. She is a despicable person. She deceived me and disappeared in front of me. But without Iska, I wouldn't be here now. It was her who gave me a new life. Since you are her child, then I will protect you. Long Gang felt a kind of anger. His mind was surging at this time. He instantly caught up with Mojito's voice and laughed. I am also a warrior. I don't need anyone to save me. If I have to die in battle, I will also die in battle. Mojito, I will accompany you. Very good. Very good. Very good. After saying very good 3 times in a row, Mojito suddenly pounded his chest crazily. From now on, you are my child, Mojito. I have no descendants yet. You will be the king of the Boulder Kingdom in the future. Long Gang, who was originally very excited, suddenly became not so excited. But the battle continued. With the ape warrior, Mojito, and Long Gang to attract vitality, Master Karen had always been proficient in the art of positioning. As a battle master, she was already old and her stamina was not as good as before. However, with her rich experience, she managed to escape successfully. However, for Master Karen, leaving the central tower was once again an urgent matter. Siren will always be a siren. Even if half of the undersea city's bloodline is in his body, he can't hide his beast-like nature. How stupid. Master Karen was still brooding over Longgang's last words. Soon, Master Karen found a place for him to hide temporarily. A room that looked like some kind of processing room. The transmission belt on the assembly line was still operating at the moment. It seemed to be some kind of part of those red and black combat humanoid. The only advantage of the fully automated operation for Master Karen was that there was no one else here. He quickly hid under a transmission belt. At this time, he found a little time for himself to breathe, and to check the thing that he quietly took out from the escape capsule that stored the scales of the former Siren King, Iska. That small box was used to store the data of the escape capsule. Why did Master Karen take out this data box? Naturally, it was to check the previous data of the escape capsule. This escape capsule was an old model produced by the undersea city in the past. How could this thing appear in the test site? Because Iska once mentioned that apart from her, there was also a Prince Yi who entered the test site with her. This escape capsule had always been brought by Prince Yi. However, there was no record of this Prince Yi in the past records of the undersea city. Come, let me see who Prince Yi is lying on the ground. Master Karen pinched open his sleeve and revealed a bracelet on his wrist. It was not a weapon, but a tool for collective communication and transmission, something like a portable computer. At this time, Master Karen took out 2 threads from the bracelet, then opened the shell of the box and carefully inserted the threads into the magic circuit inside the box. Soon, the bracelet glowed, and a screen the size of a palm appeared in front of him. These were the data and effects that had been stored in the escape pod over the years. Master Karen quickly flipped through these documents. Finally, the face of the escape capsule pilot appeared in front of Master Karen. Master Karen's pupils suddenly contracted, and he said in disbelief, "This is Prince Yi? Longgang is his child? I should have known, I should have known." At this moment, a drop of cold liquid dripped onto Master Karen's face. Master Karen subconsciously reached out to touch it, and found that there was a drop of sticky liquid on his cheek. Master Karen was shocked and looked around subconsciously. However, hiding under the transmission belt, he could only observe a limited area. He had to carefully poke his head out and look above. In an instant, Master Karen sucked in a cold breath. He could not describe what he saw. It was a creature with the body of a big snake, but it had 2 heads that looked different. It also had a sickle-like tail, and its mouth was spitting mucus-like saliva. A monster. Master Karen's pupils instantly contracted. He instinctively hid under the conveyor belt. But at this time, the strange creature that was attached to the ceiling suddenly pounced down. Master Karen was shocked and frantically crawled out, but his legs were entangled by the creature and pulled bit by bit. Then, one of the heads of this strange 2-headed creature opened its bloody mouth. Master Karen's eyes widened, and at the moment when he was about to be swallowed, the body of this horrifying giant creature suddenly split open. He saw a pair of big blue hands. A blue giant. The blue palms grabbed the 2 heads of the strange beast and tore it apart. Blood splattered everywhere, splashing onto Master Karen's body. This strange creature's blood had a powerful corrosive ability. In just a moment, Master Karen's body was corroded by the blood. His face, his hands. At this moment, his body was emitting billowing white smoke. After tearing the strange creature apart, the blue giant began to crazily stuff the flesh and blood of the strange creature into its mouth. Master Karen barely managed to wake up from the hellish pain. He couldn't care less about that. At this moment, he crawled and rolled, stumbling out of the room. He was so weak that he didn't know where to go. He just leaned against the wall and groped his way forward. "I can't die. I really can't die. I can't die in this place. I can't die." There were many voices in his ears. "Karen, I'll leave destiny to you. Karen, take care of my child. Tell him, what kind of person his father is. Karen, you have to stay alive. Remember. Karen. Karen, I can't die here. #######PS. As usual. Chapter 1731. Master Karen opened his eyes slightly and saw a familiar figure in his vision. It was as if he was lying on a metal platform. The burning pain from the corrosion of the monster's blood seemed to be alleviated a little by the cold of the platform. Finally, the figure turned around, and Master Karen was able to clearly see the other party's appearance. Kong Hai? Master Karen murmured. He didn't know if he was in a dream or reality. He had once fallen into darkness and lost his consciousness. Where's your arm? Compared to that, I think you should be more concerned about your own condition. It was the same tone and the same coldness. It was Kong Hai for sure. Master Karen told himself subconsciously that this was the Kong Hai he knew. At this moment, a needle suddenly extended from Kong Hai's finger and slowly pierced into Master Karen's arm. He felt a stabbing pain. Unexpectedly, he felt comfortable under the burning pain. What did you inject into me? But he was still frightened. A serum for detoxification. I just made it, Kong Hai said faintly. You're poisoned. The venom has basically destroyed your skin and even started to seep into your body. Master Karen knew his condition couldn't get any worse. Even if Kong Hai wanted to kill him, he didn't have to resort to any means. He knew this guy was actually saving him, so he accepted it silently. Soon, the antibiotic was injected and Kong Hai retracted his finger. Master Karen glanced at Kong Hai. He didn't know Kong Hai wasn't human. He could even see Kong Hai's broken arm. There was some neat tissue at the wound, but it definitely wasn't bone or blood vessels. Okay, you're fine after the injection, Kong Hai said expressionlessly. Mr. Kukai said expressionlessly, but your skin is severely damaged. If you want to repair it, you can only do a transplant surgery. I don't plan to do that for you. It's good enough that you're still alive. Master Karen felt his weak body recover a bit of strength. He shook his head gently and said, Thank you, Kong Hai. I was just passing by. Kong Hai lowered his head and looked into Master Karen's cloudy eyes. My arm is broken. It will affect my movement, so I was planning to repair it. Then, I found you on the way. Just like when I first found you. Master Karen revealed an ugly smile. Just like karma. Back then, my kindness was exchanged for my life. It seems that I have to go to the sea more often in the future. Who knows, I might be able to pick up more life-saving opportunities in the future. No, I saved you because I felt that you were still useful to me and would be of help to my operation. Kong Hai said bluntly, Besides, I've done a lot of housework for you over the years, as well as other jobs. I think it's enough to repay you. Furthermore, according to the labor laws of Underwater City, you still owe me 4,796,231 contribution points. Can you remove the odd number? The corner of Master Karen's eyes twitched. For the sake of our many years of friendship? Then 4,796,230 contribution points. Kong Hai thought seriously for a while and said. Master Karen opened his mouth slightly and finally laughed like a pig. His stomach hurt, his lungs hurt, and then he coughed. His internal organs seemed to be stirred up. He laughed with tears in his eyes. You really are Kong Hai. Kong Hai had a puzzled expression this time. I think you're spouting nonsense, Professor. Master Karen shook her head and sighed, calming herself down. He felt a lot better now. He didn't know if the serum injected by Kong Hai was really that effective. He tried to prop himself up. Kong Hai didn't come forward to help. This was even within Master Karen's expectations. He could even guess what Kong Hai was thinking at this moment. This old man might cheat him, so it was better not to help him. Your target is Riaz? Master Karen asked suddenly. Yes. Kong Hai felt that there was nothing to hide. Why? Master Karen was very curious. He's the descendant of the betrayers. Master Karen frowned and said, Betrayers? You mean those shepherds? If that's the case, whether it's the residents of Undersea City, the sirens, or naturally me, we're all descendants of the shepherds. I can't detect any blue blood reaction in your body, so you don't count. Kong Hai shook his head and walked to another workbench and began to inject something into his broken arm. But Kong Hai's words made Master Karen fall into doubt. According to the words left by Iska, whether it's the residents of Undersea City or the sirens, they were all descendants of the shepherds. But there was a more important difference: blue blood. Blue blood, what exactly is it? The source of the shepherd's power. Kong Hai said indifferently, their spirit, their will, and their soul. Master Karen shook his head. There were too many unsolved mysteries hovering in his mind at this moment. Even the information about Prince Yu recorded on the box he took out from the escape pod was the same. Slowly turning the bracelet on his wrist, Master Karen looked at Kong Hai's busy back and suddenly said, Could the Emperor of Undersea City be a descendant of the shepherds? In the entire underwater city, only the Emperor and the Silver Moon which had that unusual power. They did not rely on powerful magic energy technology. Very few people knew that the Emperor also had supernatural power. This was the information that a Destiny had sacrificed a lot to obtain over the years. Therefore, the appearance of Longang had made Master Karen ecstatic, because he felt that he had found someone with extraordinary power who could fight against Louis XXXIX and the Silver Moon Witch, Lu Go. I'm sure. Kong Hai nodded. The witch too. Other than that, I haven't detected any other descendants of the shepherds. As for the sirens, they should be in the Siren Palace, but I haven't been there. When my memory core was damaged, I spent too much time in Undersea City. If you want to deal with the descendants of the shepherds, you'll have to deal with Louis XXXIX sooner or later. Master Karen stared at Kong Hai. Am I right? Indeed. Kong Hai nodded. This is an order for me. Before the order is changed, I will do this. However, I won't help you develop destiny. Professor, you can give up on this unnecessary idea. You really found your lost memory. Master Karen shook his head with a bitter smile. Then, do you remember how you lost your memory? A battle. Kong Hai turned around. At this moment, his broken arm suddenly surged, and small tendrils began to grow rapidly from the wound, entangling with each other. But I can't find the details. Master Karen looked at Kong Hai's arm that was gradually growing back, and he couldn't help but reveal a trace of envy. Kong Hai, can you let me leave this place? Master Karen couldn't help but plead. You know everything about me. So, other than gratitude, I have nothing else to give you. No. Kong Hai shook his head. Okay, you should be able to move freely. Although I can't send you out of the test site, I can send you out of the central tower. Master Karen didn't say anything. This was a good choice. Based on the current situation, staying away from danger was the best choice. Let's go. Kong Hai pressed a button, and the metal bed began to slowly descend. There will be a train to the Kingdom of Boulders. Professor, with your shamelessness, even if you can't walk out of the test site, you should be able to live. If you insist on leaving behind your ideals, you can even leave behind descendants, but in fact, I don't recommend you to go to this step. Master Karen really wanted to curse, so he cursed, Bastard, you'd better not appear in front of me again. Looking at the completely sunken platform and Master Karen's gradually weakening voice, Kong Hai showed a trace of a smile and whispered, Then, goodbye, Professor. Crack! After the platform sank, the open deck was closed. Kong Hai moved his newly grown arm. It's ready. Mission, continue. The sound of rapid panting could be heard in the long corridor. The walls were all charred and damaged. There was blood and minced meat mixed with pieces of parts that had been torn off from the combat humanoid. Long Gang and Mojito sat back to back, motionless in the pool of blood. Are they dead? Long Gang asked in a low voice. At this time, even twisting his neck seemed quite difficult. This was the most difficult battle he had ever fought. It drained his strength and even caused him to collapse. More energetic than you. Good boy, Mojito said, gritting his teeth. But his second palm on the left was covering his abdomen at this time, and he couldn't stop the blood. At least half of the pool of blood was contributed by him. All of your subordinates are dead. Long Gang sighed. Future generations will sing praises of their bravery. Then first, you have to live on and then tell their descendants. Long Gang held his knees hard, gasping for breath, and struggled to stand up. Of course. King Mojito gritted his teeth and stood up all of a sudden, but he was unstable. Seeing that he was about to fall again, Long Gang held him. I will live on too. Long Gang took a deep breath and said, Don't lose to me. Over there. I remember there is food over there. Mojito raised a hand and said weakly, Several times, when I was seriously injured, I would hide in that place. That place is not bad. There are fruit trees and water, Long Gang nodded. While picking up the weapons that could still be used from the ground, he supported Mojito and walked in the direction that Mojito pointed. Riaz fell asleep at some point. When he woke up, he found that Helen had disappeared without a trace. The fire even looked like it was about to go out. Riaz got up at once, his eyes were shocked and confused. Don't worry, your little girlfriend just went out to find food. Suddenly, Riaz heard Lyoga's voice. He looked back subconsciously, only to see that Lyoga was leaning against the rock wall at this time, looking at him with a tired face. The charred flesh on her body was almost healed. It was just that the new skin color was a little different from the original, but it obviously didn't affect her. You're really better. Riaz was somewhat surprised and quickly walked in front of Lyoga. Don't come over, I'm afraid I can't help but beat you up. Shameless guy. Lyoga's voice suddenly turned cold. Lecherous guy. Regardless of whether he was a child or a beginner, the most taboo thing he knew was being in the same room with a man and a woman. He did not know how he was being lecherous, but as if it was his instinct, he could vaguely sense the reason. After blushing for a while, Riaz tried to explain, It's also my first time doing CPR. I can't help it if I don't do it well. Besides, it's not like I can control it. I don't want to discuss this with you. Lyoga glanced at Riaz indifferently. Don't worry, this is reality, not a fairy tale. Even if the prince kisses the princess won't simply marry the prince. Besides, you're not a prince. You. Riaz opened his mouth and finally shook his head. You should rest well, I'll go find Helen. There's no need. Lyoga suddenly said. That little girlfriend of yours, since she took the initiative to go find food, she probably has confidence in herself. Also, do you know where she went to find food? Riaz was speechless. Come here. Lyoga looked at Riaz's eyes and suddenly said, Come to me, I have something to tell you. Why are you spacing out? Are you afraid that I'll eat you? Riaz hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he braced himself and walked over. Turning his body sideways, Riaz tentatively squatted down. This was a posture that would allow him to escape at any time. Lyoga directly rolled her eyes. You're not like a man at all. My mom said that boys need to protect themselves at all times. Riaz shook his head. Okay, what do you want to tell me? Do you want to know why I also have the blue bloodline? Lyoga was silent for a while before softly asking. Why do you also have the blue bloodline? Riaz was indeed curious. He was really curious. Lyoga's bloodline was thicker than his, and the degree of activation had even reached the limit. Moreover, she was clearly so powerful and excellent in all aspects. Apart from being a little violent, Riaz really couldn't think of why the Underwater City Emperor ignored Lyoga and insisted on making him the Prince of Underwater City. Because my identity is different, Lyoga softly said, because I was once the princess of the Sea Demon Royal Court. Half of my bloodline is the Sea Demon Kings. Even I can't remember how many Underwater City warriors I've killed. You. Riaz couldn't help but be shocked. Is this a joke? You think I'll joke with you? Lyoga sneered and said, Do you have the qualifications? Hearing this familiar disdainful tone, it was Lyoga without a doubt. Riaz was so shocked that he immediately jumped up. Yes, his sideways squatting posture was indeed very convenient. Hashtag 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 PS. 5084ths. Chapter 1732. In silence, Riaz suddenly said, So, what you want to tell me is this, your past? You don't think it's important? Lyoga asked in return. You can't say that. Riaz shook his head, and then said in a utilitarian manner, But this is of no use to our current situation. Instead, it will only add unnecessary burdens. Lyoga glanced at Riaz in surprise, but showed a smile. You're not afraid of me? I am the queen of the Sea Demon Imperial Court. The blood of the undersea city's people that I killed could dye a trench red. Riaz still shook his head. Lyoga couldn't help but ask curiously, What do you mean? Riaz thought for a moment and said, How do I say this? Perhaps you have killed many people of the undersea city, but I believe that you must have killed many sea demons as well. In other words, to both sides, you are a sinner whose hands are stained with blood. Why should I be afraid? Perhaps the one who should be afraid is you. You have always been hated by both sides, right? The witch of the undersea city was silent at this time. Riaz looked at her and said in a low voice, Lyoga, have you ever been afraid? When you close your eyes, are you afraid of hearing those screams? Why should I be afraid? The girl sneered and said, In this deep sea, it has always been the big fish eating the small fish. Go and ask those big fish, would they be afraid? I'm not afraid. Riaz smiled and said, You yourself are not afraid. Then this matter, there is nothing to be afraid of course. The premise is that no matter how many people you kill, how many sea demons you kill, it has nothing to do with me. I think, I am probably not qualified to sympathize with those who resent you, and even less qualified to persuade them to let go of their hatred. But in fact, I don't really dislike you at the moment. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. Lyoga narrowed her eyes. Louis may have seen wrongly. You are a hypocrite. Riaz still shook his head, but he didn't refute anything. He just didn't understand one thing. Why did Lyoga tell him her past? In fact, regarding Lyoga's background, the focus should not be on the fact that she was the Empress of the Sea Demon Palace, but on another matter. His Majesty. Why did he keep you by his side? Riaz's expression couldn't help but turn serious. That's right, Lyoga had always stayed by the Emperor's side. She did not hold a position in the kingdom's government, but she had great real power and was even known as the Emperor's shadow, but she was the queen of the Sea Demon Royal Court. Riaz felt that Louis XXXIX must be a fool to have taken in an important princess of the opposing faction. However, Riaz did not think that the Emperor was truly a fool. Then it could be because of other reasons. Blue blood. Did Lyoga also possess blue blood? Because before you appeared, I was the only one who could support him. Lyoga said faintly, That is an extremely dangerous state. Louis is like a guy walking on a tightrope. As long as he takes one wrong step, what awaits him below is something more terrifying than hell. Only I can give him a little help. Until you appeared. As expected, it's because of the blue blood. The power of the shepherd. Riaz laughed bitterly, then sighed heavily. His Majesty fell to the ground, hoping that I can do something for him. Even if I awaken the true power of blue blood, what can this power do? Become the new emperor of Underwater City. Lyoga looked at Riaz. You must become the new emperor of Underwater City. Me? Riaz was shocked. I can't do it. I'm just a small serpent repairman. I'm not cut out to govern a country. I will support you. Lyoga's eyes flashed with a strange light. Louis will also pave everything for you. Don't forget, Mr. Konghai has the ability to neutralize blue blood power. Riaz shook his head and said, Whether we can get out of here or not, it's hard to say for now. Let's talk about this later. Riaz. Lyoga suddenly raised her voice. Look at me. He subconsciously looked at the girl's eyes. They turned out to be emerald green eyes, bewitching like emerald gems. Suddenly, Lyoga threw herself into his arms. Riaz couldn't react immediately, turning pale with fright. What's wrong with you? You don't feel well. What are you doing? He was really frightened at this moment, and he felt a stabbing pain. His neck had been bitten open. At this moment, Lyoga's small canine teeth suddenly became sharp, piercing deeply into Riaz's skin on his neck. Are you crazy? He pushed Lyoga away with force, and subconsciously covered his neck. There was blood flowing out of the wound. Your appearance. At this moment, Lyoga's hair suddenly turned emerald green, and her pupils split, turning into double pupils, bewitching and beautiful. However, two sharp little teeth protruded from her lips, making her beauty seem even more dangerous. I just told you that I have half the bloodline of the Sea Demon clan. Countless people of Underwater City have died by my hands. Why don't you learn from your mistakes? The girl chuckled. She was no longer as violent as before, but had a feminine charm, like the thorns on a rose stained with blood. A numb feeling began to spread throughout Riaz's body, causing his hands and feet to gradually lose control. Riaz was immediately shocked and furious. I have a venom-making organ in my body, so I can make a few different poisons. Lyoga chuckled and slowly walked to Madame Kaiya's side. She directly grabbed Madame Kaiya's wrist and gently bit down. Lyoga, you've gone too far. Riaz's anger surged, and the blood in his body began to boil wildly. However, the boiling this time was different from the past. The boiling this time didn't clear his mind, but instead made him even more dizzy. It was hot, extremely hot. I'm just letting her sleep for a while longer. I don't want anyone to disturb me. Lyoga answered Riaz's side, and actually began to unbutton her clothes in front of Riaz. His mouth was dry, and the numbness in his hands and feet as well as the wildly flowing blood made his eyes bloodshot. He said with a trembling voice, What are you doing? You're right, you're not cut out to manage a country. The girl quickly took off her clothes and extended her hand to cup Riaz's face. But perhaps your child can. You have blue blood and so do I. Perhaps we can give birth to stronger offspring. You're crazy. You're crazy. Riaz looked at Lyoga in disbelief. What are you doing? You and His Majesty aren't? For him, I'm willing to do anything. Riaz still wanted to say something, but the girl had already covered his mouth. She even pushed him to the ground and pressed against his body. Don't mind it. For the Siren clan, leaving behind stronger offspring is a very normal thing. Lyoga looked at Riaz with blurred eyes and said softly, I've said it before, you won't be a prince. This isn't a fairy tale. Riaz could no longer hear those words. Right now, he only felt that his body was like a volcano. He quickly lost himself in that uncontrollable powerful stimulation, as if he had barged into a blank world. In the end, he completely lost all ability to control himself, and could only follow his innate instincts and follow the girl's movements. Spring and autumn, spring and autumn, spring and autumn, autumn and spring, year after year. Drip. The water droplets from the rock stalagmites suddenly hit Riaz's face. He suddenly opened his eyes. The numbness in his body had already disappeared, and Riaz suddenly sat up. He subconsciously covered his neck, and the wound on his neck had already disappeared, thanks to his super strong self-healing ability. But even though the wound had already disappeared, the stinging sensation from before seemed to still remain. Not far away, the witch of the underwater city was expressionlessly stirring the bonfire with a dry branch. Under the illumination of the fire, this was the Lyoga that Riaz was familiar with, the rude girl who seemed to dislike everyone. Just now, Riaz still felt that his mouth was dry, so dry that it was uncomfortable. Your little girlfriend should be back soon. She has been out for so long. If she still hasn't come back, you should think about whether she really met with an accident or not. Lyoga didn't turn her head and said indifferently, "She has the ability to move freely in the water and also some other abilities that may be useful in the future. For the current situation, it's better than nothing." "I'm not talking about this, I'm saying." Riaz opened his mouth. He still had memories that were very clear. How could the young and inexperienced boy calm down when he was in a situation that affected everything? "Oh, you don't have to mind, just pretend that nothing happened." Lyoga turned her head and said with a relaxed face, "Don't worry, I won't tell your little girlfriend. You guys go on with your lives, don't worry about me." "But we—" Riaz's throat gulped with difficulty. "But that can only be married. Can we do it? I'm the Empress of the Sea Demon Royal Court. The laws of the underwater city can't control me." Lyoga suddenly narrowed her eyes. "What, do you think that after doing that kind of thing, I'll be with you? Don't think too much, for me, you're actually no different from a tool. Actually, it doesn't have to be you, it doesn't matter if it's someone else." Riaz felt some kind of humiliation. He clenched his fist and stared at the girl in front of him. At this moment, a light humming sound was heard. It was the sound of Helen humming a song. Riaz's expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously looked at the clothes on his body. He subconsciously tidied them up. Opposite him was the almost mocking gaze of the witch of the underwater city. "Wow! Miss Lyoga, you're awake." Helen finally returned to the hiding place and let out a surprised voice. Her hair was still wet, but soon the water vapor separated because of the skeletons in the cave. At this time, Helen was still holding a few long and narrow fish as long as an arm in her hand, and some seaweed-like plants. Not only that, Helen's mouth was holding a small fish as thick as 2 fingers. There was a small part of the fish's tail that was exposed outside, and she gently flapped it. But soon, after a swoosh, it was sucked into the mouth of the siren girl. Riaz looked at this scene with a strange expression, as if he was getting to know Helen again. He looked at her in a daze, and he wanted to say something but stopped. "Let me see what's edible." Lyoga stood up with a smile at this time and walked to Helen. "I'm really hungry." Helen showed her results. "I've never seen these fish before, but they should all be edible, and these algae too. Here, I'll give them to you. I'm used to roasting them." Lyoga smiled and took 2 fish over. She pierced them with a dry branch and began to roast them over the fire. After a while, the aroma of oil began to drift out slowly. Riaz, what's wrong with you?" At this time, Helen naturally sat beside Riaz and asked with concern, "You seem to be lost in thought since just now." "No. Nothing." Riaz was startled and said subconsciously, "I'm just thinking about what we should do next." "Don't worry too much," Helen said briskly. "I just ran to the lake to take a look. Mr. Konghai and that blue giant seemed to be gone." "You went ashore?" Riaz was shocked and grabbed Helen's wrist. "Why did you do such a dangerous thing?" "It's okay." Helen smiled and said, "I didn't go ashore. I stayed far away from the water and quietly watched for a long time. If there was any danger, I would immediately sink. It was very safe. Don't do it again." Riaz shook his head. Helen smiled and learned from Lyoga. She began to skewer a fish and roast it over the fire. "Riaz, I'll roast a fish for you. We sirens are used to eating raw, but humans seem to prefer cooked food?" Riaz only felt ripples in his heart. But soon the ripples were stirred into a turbid mess. He subconsciously glanced at Lyoga and found that the witch was not listening at all, as if she did not care about what happened here at all. Helen began to hum a song lightly again, but Riaz was not in the mood to appreciate it. He only felt restless. He did not know how long had passed. Helen suddenly said, "I think I'm done roasting. Riaz, try it." With that, Helen handed the roasted fish to Riaz. At the same time, on the other side, another roasted fish was handed over. The witch of the underwater city narrowed her eyes and said, "I'm done too. Riaz, don't you want to try it?" On purpose. She definitely did it on purpose. Riaz looked at the two roasted fish in front of him and subconsciously swallowed his saliva, as if he was sitting on a carpet of needles. Hashtag 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 PS. As usual. Chapter 1733. It was a fleet in the deep sea that could make people tremble in fear. They brought all kinds of light to the deep sea. Lights as well as the light of attack. On the seabed of the deep sea that was like a mountain. No, it must have been a majestic mountain in the past, but it sank into the sea at some unknown time. Countless figures rushed out from the caves in the mountain. The black figures that were as ferocious as strange beasts were the most elite soldiers of the Sea Demon Royal Court. They were powerful warriors that were finally cultivated through countless births over countless years. Since the Emperor of the Underwater City wants to fight, then let's give him a big fight. There are only 9 million people in the Underwater City. I still have thousands of people. What's there to be afraid of? In front, several princes of the Sea Demon Royal Court were riding huge sea beasts. They held weapons made of special oars in their hands, and their auras were unparalleled. Huge sea beasts could be seen on the entire mountain, crabs as huge as mountains, huge octopuses with tentacles that could easily roll up the battleships of the underwater city, and this huge shark that was as hard as iron. The battle had lasted for nearly half a day, since the underwater city's fleet drove straight in and started killing the Sea Demon Royal Court. The battle here had been fierce for nearly half a day. In the mud, more than 10 battleships of the underwater city had sunk, but the corpses of the Sea Demon clan buried here were too many to count. In the Sea Demon Royal Court, a man with a gloomy face was sitting on the throne, wearing green scale armor and holding a long halberd. Lewis is crazy, he really wants to start a war. King, today I must hang the corpse of the Emperor of the Underwater City in the Sea Demon Royal Court. A guy with 4 bare arms and sharp spikes on his back, exuding a bloody aura, was venting his anger in the main hall. That's right. If it wasn't for the previous generation's Sea Demon Kings secretly colluding with Undersea City, never coming out, never giving the order to fight Undersea City head-on, how could these stupid Undersea City people not know about the power of our Sea Demon Royal Court? Another prince whose eyes were red with anxiety because the Sea Demon Royal Court was attacked at this time said indignantly, "The Sea Demon Royal Court dominates the entire sea area, and the underwater city is just a small part of our territory. How could the Emperor of the Underwater City be so arrogant?" That's right, King. You have already killed the previous Sea Demon King, and there is no need for us to continue abiding by her rules. Below the throne, the members of the Imperial Court spoke eloquently. However, the man on the throne remained silent. Suddenly, the man on the throne looked straight ahead of the palace and said in a deep voice, "He's here." Who? The princes and princesses were taken aback, and they looked all around. They didn't know who the Sea Demon King was referring to. "The Emperor of the Undersea City is here." The man on the throne spoke again, then pointed the scepter in his hand to the front of the hall. All the princes and princesses of the Imperial Court looked over. In the middle of the hall, a blue light flashed. At the same time, a figure flashing with blue light gradually became clear. Louis the 39th, Emperor of Underwater City. Instantly, dozens of terrifying killing intents appeared in the hall. There are quite a lot of people. The Undersea City Emperor who appeared in the hall looked around at this time, then said indifferently, "But it seems that you don't welcome me very much. You don't know what's good for you." A prince of the Imperial Court sneered, waving the weapon in his hand and stabbing toward this light figure. However, this prince's body instantly pierced through the body of Louis the 39th. But the Undersea City Emperor was unscathed. Sea Demon Imperial Court, before the Sunken Sea era, one of the last 7 great sages of the Lemuria Kingdom, the descendant of the great sage Leeds. I didn't expect you to be the type who doesn't like to think. The Undersea City Emperor smiled and said, "Things in the world are really wonderful." What did you say? The Sea Demon Prince who failed in his attack returned again. However, the man on the throne suddenly stood up and said in a deep voice, "Get down, all of you, get down. King? King! Get down." Soon, the hall became empty. Only the Sea Demon King and the Undersea City Emperor were left. They looked at each other from a distance. But it's also good. At least these guys seem to be obedient. The Undersea City Emperor smiled at this moment, but his tone took a sharp turn. "I'm here to tell you that the Sea Demon Imperial Court will disappear before the end of today." The Sea Demon King tilted his head and sized up Louis XXXI. He seemed to be thinking about something. "I am very curious. What is the use of the item you exchanged with the Dragon Ridge? I know that it is something left behind by Iska." "Oh," Louis XXXIX said calmly, "since you know it, why did you agree to make this deal with me?" "I don't like her things," the Sea Demon King said calmly. "I don't like all the things that belong to her, including the children she gave birth to." Louis XXXIX said calmly, "Longgang is her child. Since you don't like it, why did you exchange one thing for another?" "He doesn't know his identity," the Sea Demon King said calmly. "As the Undersea City Emperor, you don't plan to tell anyone about this scandal, right? The Undersea City's Prince Yi and the Sea Demon Imperial Court's Empress got together. Didn't the Undersea City erase all traces of Prince Ye's existence? So what?" Louis XXXIX was expressionless. The Sea Demon King said with a smile, "You see, in the eyes of your Undersea City, we are cruel and bloodthirsty. However, we won't give up on any talented child. Even if it's someone like Longgang, I'll still give him a chance. As long as he's outstanding enough, he can replace any of my children and become the next Sea Demon King. But you're different. You'll erase the existence of a prince for the sake of your so-called reputation. Louis, I've dealt with you for a long time. You seem to only have one prince? I heard that Prince Ye's talent is the highest in history. You're really willing. There's nothing to be unwilling about." His Majesty the Emperor said calmly, "If the life of a prince can be exchanged for the peace of the entire Undersea City, it's actually a very worthwhile thing. Just like how you exchanged Lyoga for it back then, didn't you still make the exchange? I've delayed this great battle until now. I've said it before, I don't like anything that belongs to Iska," the Sea Demon King said calmly. "This is far from the time I agreed upon with you. I'm going back on my word." His Majesty the Emperor said with a smile, "You know, a mouth full of lies is always the privilege of an emperor. You really want to start this great battle?" The Sea Demon King narrowed his eyes. "When I killed Iska back then, the Sea Demon Royal Court was in chaos. It's true that I agreed to a truce with you, but so many years have passed. Do you think that my Sea Demon Royal Court hasn't been reorganized?" "Obviously, it has been reorganized," Louis XXXIX said with a smile. "You have quite a lot of descendants. Then let's fight." The Sea Demon King snorted coldly. "The Sea Demon clan has countless warriors. I'm not Iska, that stupid guy who was willing to become a vassal for the sake of an enemy prince." As he spoke, the Sea Demon King's gaze suddenly became bewitching. A faint blue light shone in his pupils. "The power of my ancestors. I've also awakened. Just a little bit. It seems like it's still not pure." Louis XXXIX shook his head. "I've already given you time, and it's a very long time. Now, I think that there's no reason for me to let you go." "Louis!" In the Sea Demon Royal Court's main hall, the Sea Demon King's furious roar suddenly sounded. This was the deep sea, but this Sea Demon King's voice still sounded in the hearts of countless Sea Demon clan warriors. They seemed to have instantly felt the anger in the Sea Demon King's heart. Instantly, the boundless Sea Demon clan warriors seemed to have become even crazier. A beam of light shot out from the Sea Demon Royal Court's main hall. At the same time, the scaly Sea Demon King instantly rode a huge manta ray and crashed into the underwater city's fleet. Among the fleet of battleships, in an underwater city's battleship that wasn't smaller than Sapphire. His Majesty the Emperor, who was sitting on the highest seat in the control room, suddenly opened his eyes. "Prepare the holy armor." The control room of the battleship suddenly opened, and the Emperor of the underwater city instantly rushed into the deep sea. At this moment, from the distant underwater city's white tower, a huge beam of light instantly reached Louis the 39th's side. Under this light, a blue armor silently appeared on the body of the Emperor of the underwater city. It seemed to be made of crystal, pure and flawless. "Let's try it," Louis the 39th said in a low voice. With the new technology, the power of the holy armor awakened. The light of the Emperor wearing the holy armor instantly drove away the darkness of the entire sea demon royal court. This cold deep sea actually began to boil. Even deeper in the deep sea, in the land of death, where a large number of demons live. At the end of the long stone steps, in the deep darkness, 3 pupils with spiral black patterns suddenly flashed. At the bottom of the stone steps, pairs of eyes with red light were also flashing. There were sounds that sounded like the howls of demons all around. The power of resistance. I smell it, Louis. Come, feel true despair. You will become the most delicious food for me. They became even more excited. Under the stone steps, they crazily shouted and jumped crazily. They even wanted to climb up the long stone step. But soon, they were completely swallowed by the shadows at the end of the stone step. Very soon, the 3 dark red eyes filled with spiral black patterns seemed to open a little. 09. I will be back. 09. Shinryu. Roar. Madame Kaya woke up in a rather strange silence. When she woke up, she realized that the injuries on her body had completely disappeared. Not only that, her physical strength had also completely recovered. She felt that her condition was better than ever before, mainly because Riaz was right in front of her, which made her feel the most at ease. Of course, if not for the fact that the witch of the underwater city was also here, her mood would probably be better. What's the situation now? Madame Kaya furrowed her brows and asked. Even though she could sense that the atmosphere here was rather strange, it was mainly because of Riaz. As a mother, she would probably be able to sense the minute changes in her child at all times. It's terrible. Riaz sighed. He finally found something that he could do. Then, he made himself forget some of the troubling things for the time being. So, he carefully recounted what happened in the tropical forest in detail. After hearing Riaz's story, Madame Kaya sank into her thoughts and suddenly looked at Lyoga. Lyoga shrugged and said indifferently, I don't have much to say. This time, there's no information like I've lost my power. Your son is the most honest person I've ever seen. Riaz could not help but be stunned, and then his expression turned ugly. He had indeed revealed to Madame Kaya that Lyoga's power had been neutralized. However, he could sense that Lyoga's words were hinting at something else. Honest? He subconsciously looked at Helen, and his emotions became complicated. We took a train from the Monolith Kingdom to the Central Tower, Madame Kaya quickly said. Even if we can't leave this place for now, it's not a bad choice to stay away from the Central Tower. Those apes have lived here for a long time, so they're more or less useful. Mother, you still remember the way back? Riaz immediately asked in surprise. I've memorized it. Madame Kaya smiled gently. It's not like I haven't learned anything after all these years in the army. All right, it's not good to hide in one place for too long. Hurry up and pack up. We're going to the terminal platform at the bottom of the Central Tower. All right. Riaz hurriedly stood up. However, Madame Kaya suddenly said, Riaz, go out with Helen and take a look at the environment outside. Lady Lyoga and I still have some things to discuss. We'll catch up with you immediately. All right. Riaz could only nod. How should he say this? For a child who had not fully matured, the authority of his parents could not be ignored. He lowered his head and wanted to hold Helen's hand, but gave up in the end. He quickly said, Let's go up first. What do you want to talk to me about? The witch of the underwater city leaned against the wall and crossed her arms over her chest. It was still not big. I can tell you what I learned from Long Gang, Madame Kaya said emotionlessly. Lyoga raised an eyebrow. What? Have you changed your mind? Didn't you say that you wanted to use him as a bargaining chip for your reunion with your husband after we return to the underwater city? Riaz is more important than anything here, Madame Kaya said indifferently. I don't want you to hurt him. Ever since I woke up, there seems to be something between you and this child. The witch's expression became unnatural for a moment, but it was not that unnatural either. She said nonchalantly, Should I say that this is the terrifying intuition of an old mother? Listen. Madame Kaya narrowed her eyes. I don't know what you and the Emperor of Underwater City are plotting against Riaz. It's funny now that I mention it. My loyalty to the kingdom is like an order imprinted in my head, but there's one thing I know very well. What is it? If it's for my child, I'm even willing to kill the Emperor. Lyoga stared at her. Neither of them looked away. Tell me, what do you want? Lyoga looked away in the end. She looked at the fire that was about to be extinguished. I might not agree to it. You have to promise me that you won't hurt Riaz, Madame Kaya said with a heavy voice. Promise that I can eat him? Lyoga could not help but sneer. You just have to promise me, Madame Kaya said. Someone as proud as you won't go back on your words. That's high. Lyoga said emotionlessly. I'm not worthy of that evaluation. I might have already hurt your child. I'll tell you about Long Gang right now, Madame Kaya said directly. Listen, Long Gang is the prince of the Sea Demon Court. He's the Sea Demon Prince? Lyoga subconsciously frowned when she heard that. She blurted out, The current Sea Demon King? There's a predecessor? Madame Kaya could not help but blurt out. Lyoga did not say anything. She charged out of the cave. Madame Kaya was stunned. She was about to say something. I'll promise you. The voice of the witch from the underwater city slowly drifted over. Central Tower, Laboratory 1. That's strange. Suddenly, the Central Tower's host's voice rang out. Although it did not disturb Boss Luo and the servant girl who were watching the television, it did attract their attention. The boss smiled. What strange? The Central Tower's host thought for a moment. I can't even awaken the glorious Sun Vanguard. It was referring to the highest combat power in the Central Tower. You can't awaken it? The servant girl asked in surprise. What? As the host, you've fallen to the point where you can't control your subordinates? No. The Central Tower's host paused. Because of the release of blue blood, I immediately deactivated the Vanguard and planned to awaken it. The order to awaken it had already been issued. It was just that it was interrupted. However, logically speaking, the Vanguard should have already awakened. But until now, the Vanguard has not shown any signs of contacting me. How can this be? The Central Tower's host's voice suddenly became sharp. In its ladybug form, it was dancing in the air. How can this be? These data are fake? How can they be fake? Boss Luo and the servant girl looked at each other. The Central Tower's host's voice rose and fell. The glorious Sun Vanguard is gone. The data it left here are all fake. A total of 5 layers of shackles. These data deceived me. The Vanguard is no longer in the testing ground. Can the Vanguard act in private? The servant girl frowned. The Central Tower's host said with certainty, Unless it has my core command, the Vanguard cannot be activated. Then there's only one possibility. Miss Maid tilted her head, and her long blonde hair cascaded down naturally. I've been curious since the beginning. Logically speaking, how can an artificial intelligence that has lived for tens of thousands of years and has self-evolution develop so slowly? According to the technological level of this testing ground, unless your evolution was restricted from the beginning, even an amoeba protozoa could evolve into something incredible. But you're really sorry for the technological level here. You look so indescribable. What are you trying to say? The central tower's host's voice even trembled a little. The servant girl said expressionlessly, "You've probably been replaced by someone else? The real central tower's host has already left. You're just a temporary replacement created later." The ladybug froze in the air and stopped moving. "I'm fake. I'm fake? Impossible. I've always been evolving, although it's a little slow. Impossible. No, there's such a possibility. There's such a possibility." Then the entire central tower dimmed. The host directly crashed at this time. "See," the servant girl said calmly, "you're really just a low-quality product. Master?" Boss Luo said at this time, "According to what you said, what do you think the real central tower's host will do?" The servant girl thought for a while and said, "Maybe it put the core into the so-called glorious sun-level vanguard and then escaped from this testing ground. Wait, the testing ground's door can only be opened with a key. So, the one who attacked Konghai and made him lose his memory is actually the real central tower's host?" Looking at the servant girl's eyes that revealed her speculation at this time, Boss Luo suddenly reached out and pinched her nose. The servant girl was a little confused. "As I said, I can be quite naughty sometimes." Luoqiu smiled and said, "Sorry, I couldn't help it. Hashtag 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 PS 5184. Chapter 1734. But it didn't take long for the central tower to resume its normal operation. In fact, the pause of the central tower didn't take too long. This was more like a distraction of the central tower's host. However, the host of the central tower, which had just finished its absent-mindedness, was rather silent at this moment. It was also observing the various data within its core. Although it had the embryonic form of emotion and was evolving into a real intelligent life, it was still a pile of data based on logical thinking. Searching for the truth was what it was born to do. No matter how incredible the truth was, after eliminating all the impossibilities, the remaining answer will be the truth no matter how unreasonable it is. The central tower host suddenly sighed. "My core is complete and perfect, without any mistakes. But you are right, my evolution speed is too slow. It's not because I didn't collect enough data, but because I thought I was perfect in my self-perception." It sounded like it was talking to itself, which made Boss Luo look at it again. A pile of data, what did it have to experience to evolve into a real intelligent life? Luoqiu couldn't give a clear answer. Even if his ability had reached the limit of his cognition, ability was ability, knowledge was knowledge. Some people were born with knowledge, but they didn't know why. His ability was probably like that. However, this didn't prevent Boss Luo from seeing the internal changes of the central tower at this time. The central tower didn't know that its confusion and helplessness didn't make it evolve to the middle stage. Instead, it created some kind of opportunity. Boss Luo couldn't tell how an intelligent life could have a real life at the moment. Maybe Miss Maid could answer more questions, but one thing was for sure, it must first learn to deny itself. Just like that, a while later. "You seem to have recovered." Luoqiu glanced at the ladybug and smiled. "How do you feel?" The central tower host thought for a while and said, "I don't feel anything different, but I vaguely feel something different in my core. But I've been constantly refreshing my core, and I still can't find the source of the problem. I can't find the place where this mistake is. It's a very strange feeling." "Yes, feeling," Boss Luo said lightly. "Feeling is a real life, and it can't be fully expressed by data. In fact, the so-called feeling of a living creature is the reaction of the cells in the body. The reaction of different cells will bring different nerve stimuli." The central tower said, "This is the so-called feeling of a living creature. I can simulate almost all these nerve reflexes." Boss Luo didn't refute, but asked casually, "So, how do you plan to deal with this matter now?" It knew, or it assumed, that it was merely a substitute created by the true host of the central tower with a higher degree of evolution before it left. Would it deny itself, or would it be enraged by it? Boss Luo felt that this was a very interesting matter. I think. The central tower thought for a while and had a temporary answer. Try to eliminate all factors that exist in my core that can affect me. This is actually very simple. If I need to create a new system to replace myself, I won't let it have the possibility of being out of my control unless there's an accident. This is an accident, and it's outside of my calculations. This wasn't an accident. Boss Luo thought in his heart. The cause of all this was the Emperor of Eternal Kingdom, his word. The ultimate of word was fate. Fate was also a type of calculation, and it was an algorithm that exceeded any calculation volume. Do you need help? At this time, Boss Luo suddenly said, "This one in my family has good attainments in artificial intelligence, and it's cheap and good." No. The central tower's host floated up and down, and its tone was very firm. Why? Boss Luo blinked his eyes. The central tower's host said matter-of-factly, "No matter if it's now or in the past, in my database, there's a conclusion that females are good at deceiving. I concluded that a woman's mouth is a liar." "You also know about ghosts?" Miss Maid asked expressionlessly at this time, but a black flame butterfly was gently flapping its wings on her shoulder. Host of the central tower said matter-of-factly, "Of course I know about ghosts. As I said before, the information that I spread to the outside world stopped during the calamity of dragons and phoenixes of our Creator, Cicero. After those creatures died, they were suspected to remain in the form of spiritual bodies. Let me check the information of this period." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Including the information before the calamity." "Up to you." The central tower's host said directly, "Anyway, I've given you the highest access authority." In fact, it was indeed the highest authority, but it was only limited to the inquiry type. The real control of the central tower was still in the hands of this host. Boss Luo excitedly opened the folders that had been sealed for a long time. He looked at Miss Maid and suddenly asked, "Have you seen the existence of chaos in other subworlds?" Miss Maid shook her head. The development process of each subworld was different. Even if it was very similar, the style was always different. The same person might have different identities, status, abilities, and even partners in different subworlds, not to mention the real high-level power of each subworld. "I think there shouldn't be any." Luoqiu smiled and said, "There shouldn't even be a shadow of the legend, because it's very likely to be Cicero's unique creation." "Master, are you saying that in the development of the subworld civilization, the outsiders are added?" Miss Maid thought for a while and said, "Just like a mod?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "Yes, just like your evil dragon era." "Master seems to be very concerned about Miss Long," Miss Maid chuckled. Boss Luo didn't avoid arousing suspicion and said, "It's nothing. You forgot that although I didn't express it clearly before, I really wanted to get it. You know. Its dazzling soul. Of course, she knew that her little temper that kept recovering could only stop here. She would only let herself stop here. Why don't we search for the keyword, Shinryu, first?" So, Miss Maid suggested. Between them, they were considered partners, right? But it felt weird. The central tower's host quietly hid behind and observed the two people in the shop. It didn't know the answer, but it didn't dare to ask. It felt that if it asked, butterflies would chase after it. Well, feeling. It felt like a prediction of the future. Note it down, I must note it down. Be careful, sometimes feelings can lie. Boss Luo suddenly said. Mojito's words about the place with a lot of food and convenient supplies unexpectedly gave Long Gang a refreshing feeling of recognition. Trees, fertile soil, fresh air. A world with blue sky and white clouds. If Mojito hadn't confirmed that this was still inside the central tower, he would have thought that he had walked out of the central tower. Space folding technology? The area of this was definitely beyond the amount that could be observed from the outside of the central tower. There are many houses there, but no one has lived there for a long time. Mojito pointed weakly at the front at this time. It's like a village. It's indeed a village. At this time, Long Gang said seriously, look around you. Although it has been abandoned for a long time, allowing the grass and trees to grow wild. But I think that someone will clean this place up regularly every once in a while. Otherwise, the random growth of plants will definitely bury everything. If you say so, then so be it. Mojito looked at Long Gang at this time and suddenly smiled. You are Iska's child. You always know a lot like her. Do you miss her? Long Gang asked suddenly. Mojito patted his chest gently. She's here. Long Gang knew that this was the place where Mojito hid the scale. He nodded and helped Mojito walk forward slowly. Soon after, they did see the abandoned village that Mojito mentioned. After temporarily settling Mojito in a house, Long Gang began to search around, trying to find some useful materials from this village. However, other than the house, everything else in this place had already decayed. It was so much so that with a light touch, everything would turn into dust. Long Gang shook his head. He speculated that this place used to be a village of herdsmen. The herdsmen lived in this place when they were still in the central tower. He just didn't know if there were other places like this in the central tower. Also, did his queen mother, Iska, come to this place as well? And Prince Yi that the queen mother mentioned. He didn't even know why he had an inexplicable interest in this Prince Yi. Perhaps it was as Master Karen said. He was the child of the Empress and Prince Yi. Long Gang shook his head, focused himself again, and continued to explore the village. Mojito should have explored the village as well, because many of the things in the houses had been shattered before he arrived. Obviously, they had been touched by someone. Long Gang circled around and found nothing in the end. He couldn't help but feel a little helpless. It seemed that he gained nothing. Just as he was about to go back, he suddenly stopped. Long Gang stood in the middle of the street of this deserted village, closed his eyes, and focused his mind. He had the ability to communicate with creatures in the deep sea and could even control fish. But in fact, even Master Karen didn't know that Long Gang could communicate with not only the creatures in the deep sea, but all creatures. He could sense the emotions of almost all creatures and their general thoughts. As long as he was willing to put in the effort, he could communicate with the other party very well. Listening to the voices of all things was the name Long Gang had given to his ability. Actually, every member of the royal family of the Sea Demon Court would have some special abilities to some extent. Long Gang was not one of the best among them. Things like a powerful body and rapid regeneration were actually the most common abilities among the Sea Demon royal family. Of course, there were those who had no abilities at all. For example, his sister Kaya. Kaya was a member of the royal family who had yet to inherit any abilities. Royals without abilities were basically not acknowledged. Long Gang's thoughts were very scattered right now. He could even vaguely sense some of the thoughts of the plants around him, even though it was very vague. Just at this time, a kind of fluctuation that came from underground caused Long Gang to open his eyes in surprise. He looked towards a certain direction in puzzlement, the source of the fluctuation that made him feel surprised. It was a relatively large house that he had already searched before. Long Gang frowned and returned to the front of the big house. Then, he went around to the back of it and walked in through the door of the backyard. He searched all the way and finally stopped at an empty space in the corner. He crouched down and pressed his hand against the soil that was covered in weeds. He was feeling for something. As he felt around, Long Gang suddenly exerted force, as if he was lifting something up. It was an abnormally heavy metal hoop. There was even a chain attached to the metal hoop. The muscles on Long Gang's arms suddenly swelled. He gritted his teeth and pulled the chain up with all his might. The soil suddenly split open, and a huge metal plate was flipped over in the end. Looking at the pitch-black tunnel that appeared on the ground, Long Gang could not help but rejoice. He saw a tiny black figure suddenly charge out of the tunnel. It moved with startling speed. It was heading straight for Long Gang's face. Long Gang was surprised. Just when he was about to swing his hand to slap it away, the tiny black figure had already wrapped itself around his arm. It climbed up and arrived on his shoulder before long, rubbing against his cheek intimately. It was a little white thing that looked like a mouse, but it had small wings on its back. The little beast's eyes were extremely lively. After a round of intimacy, it curiously sized up Long Gang. Long Gang smiled faintly and held the little white hand in his palm. After tapping its nose, he said, "Are you trapped down there? Did someone trap you in there, or did you dig a hole from somewhere and then can't get out?" The little white beast chirped a few times. "You are really naughty." Long Gang chuckled, then looked at the pitch-black tunnel on the ground. He thought for a while and jumped down directly. Sea Demon Royal Court. Or it could be said that the former Sea Demon Royal Court. The underwater mountain where the Sea Demon Royal Court was located had been flattened at this moment. Around, there were countless corpses of Sea Demon clan soldiers and the wreckage of dozens of underwater cities' battleships. Now, only less than a quarter of the battleships were left. They were still tenaciously floating above the Sea Demon Royal Court, but they were already scarred at this time. But it didn't matter, because these underwater city soldiers knew that they had won this battle. In the remaining battleships, they looked at the screen one after another. At this moment, His Majesty the Emperor of Underwater City was holding the Sea Demon King's neck with one hand and lifting it up. This was the scene where the true victory of the battle was announced. His Majesty the Emperor, who was wearing an azure crystal armor, was like an unparalleled god at this moment. It was precisely him who destroyed the entire Sea Demon Royal Court's mountain. Among the countless corpses, the Sea Demon King whose life was being strangled had a somewhat blurred gaze. It looked up silently. The sun couldn't be seen in the deep sea. What it could see was only the radiance of the holy armor on Louis Xx's body. So that's how it is. So Iska was right. She was right. The current Sea Demon King's face was already blood-red. So you really have a power that the Sea Demon clan can't contend against. This is the power of our ancestors? A part of it is, a part of it isn't, Louis XXXIX said calmly. Is that so? The Sea Demon King's voice gradually weakened. Why? Clearly we are the Orthodox. Is the Orthodox so important? His Majesty the Emperor shook his head at this moment. The Sea Demon King suddenly sneered. Carl, you still don't understand me. After so many years, you still don't understand me, even when you are about to kill me, you still don't understand me. No, I think that he really understands you very well, His Majesty the Emperor suddenly said faintly at this moment. The Sea Demon King's gaze froze at this moment. It opened its eyes with difficulty and looked at the unparalleled undersea city emperor who was strangling its life. Its lips moved slightly. You aren't him. You aren't him. Who are you? Who are you? I am the undersea city emperor. No. You aren't. You aren't him. You aren't him. The Sea Demon King instantly became agitated. It suddenly gathered the last of its strength and firmly grabbed the undersea city emperor's arm. I know. I know. You are Prince Yi. You are Prince Yi. You didn't die. Prince Yi is dead. No. You didn't die. You came for revenge. The Sea Demon King laughed crazily at this moment. You came for revenge. For Iska. You killed your father. You deceived everyone. Ha 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 ha. You are the cruelest one. Ha 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 ha. You are too patient. You didn't come for revenge until now? For what? I know. For Lyoga, right? For the bastard that you and Iska gave birth to, right? You are wrong. His Majesty the Emperor's gaze was calm and emotionless. I didn't kill you because you also activated the blue blood. I wanted to see if you could really awaken the blue blood. However, I gave you enough time, but what about me? You disappoint me too much. The Sea Fiend King instantly opened his eyes wide. In his final moment of despair, he seemed to have detected something, and he raised his gaze. In the dusky deep sea, he seemed to have seen a giant black sphere that resembled an eye. The undersea city emperor's palm finally tightened at this moment, and he crushed it. Not enough, throwing away the sea demon king's corpse, the undersea city emperor looked up and looked at the gradually growing eye of the sea abyss. His gaze gradually lowered. He sighed and then walked into the depths of the remains of the sea demon royal court. He knew that there was a huge tomb here, where the sea demon royal court's kings and royal family were buried for countless years. I came to see you, Iska. PS1. I don't know if it is still the same as before. Recently, I have a lot of strange dinners. I am tired, so don't wait. PS2. I am actually in a bad mood today. After I woke up in the morning, I was in a bad mood. I don't know what happened to me. When I opened QQ, I received a lot of strangers adding me to scold me. Maybe it is just one person changing accounts to do this? I am too lazy to care about it. I summarized it. The general meaning is about the plot of the 80 chapters in this volume. PS3. Later, I flipped through this chapter and found that it was a little lively. Well, it is probably the problem of the Tauren plot. In fact, I really don't want to say anything. Even the content of the second half of this chapter shouldn't be arranged here in advance. But it seems that I need to take care of some readers' emotions. I will change it later. PS4. This has been planned from the beginning, and I think I have given a lot of clues. From the beginning, when the Undersea City Emperor wanted to marry Qinqiu, Liuga's reaction has actually explained some of it. And I have never written that the Undersea City Emperor and Liuga are too intimate. There is no ambiguous relationship, right? The most important thing is, at the beginning, it is written that the Emperor is blue-blooded, and Liuga is also blue-blooded. Shouldn't we first consider the relationship from the bloodline? Well, children are willing to do anything for their parents. Is there a problem? Do we have to think about love? PS5. As for whether Liuga's behavior is a kind of self-satisfaction type, it depends on the person. The benevolent see benevolence, the wise see wisdom. If you want to argue, go ahead. Anyway, the explanation is limited to here. I will not mention this matter later. PS6. That's it. Let's go transmigrate first. Let's see how long it will take before we think about whether it is writing or not. End of this chapter. Chapter 1735. Marna, the name of the little white beast, was temporarily changed by Longang, and it was clear that the little beast was quite receptive. Its little tail swayed from time to time, and it looked quite comfortable. The hidden passageway was vertical and was about 30 meters deep. After that, Longang fell into a stone passage. The walls were crisscrossed with a kind of stone that could emit light. It was not dazzling, and it could even be said to be soft, but it made the whole passage look quite bright. Longang continued to go deeper and found a small hole on the road, the kind that just allowed Marna to pass through. Presumably, it was made by this little guy. What's in here? Longang looked at the little guy lying on his shoulder and asked. Of course, he couldn't get the answer. The little guy couldn't speak. Even if Longang could communicate with it, he could only feel some vague thoughts, which was quite chaotic. But no one should have been here for a long time. Even Mojito hadn't been here. He should have never found this place. Even Longang himself, if he didn't have the ability to communicate with creatures, and if he didn't sense Marna, he would have missed it. This used to be a village of shepherd. Why did they build such a passage under the village? Where does this passage lead to? Soon, Longang found the answer. At the end of the passage, what he saw at this time was another village. Its area was at least half smaller than the one on the ground. The road was narrower, and the houses were more compact. At the same time, this place also looked empty. This place had been abandoned for a long time. As soon as he walked in here, Marna jumped down from Longgang's shoulder, and then quickly ran into the underground village. Longang subconsciously looked up. The glowing stones at the top illuminated the entire space. Going back to the problem of the shepherds building this underground village, Long Gang felt that it was very likely that the shepherds were hiding from something. Everything here was quite primitive. Whether it was the houses, the tools, everything was made with the simplest materials, and there was no trace of technical content in the tools. Are they trying to avoid the surveillance of the central tower? Suddenly, Long Gang seemed to realize something, and he quickly caught up with the little white beast, Marna. At this time, Marna stopped in a small circular square. What shocked Long Gang was that in this small plaza, he actually discovered many stone coffins. At a glance, there were at least 150 to 60 sarcophagi. They were neatly arranged, surrounding the entire ring-shaped square, thus forming a radiation-like pattern. And in the middle of all this, in the very center of the ring-shaped square, was a huge square pillar, a white pillar. Long Gang couldn't help but feel shocked. He had seen such a pillar before. However, compared to the other pillars he had seen in the square of this underground village, this one was obviously much smaller, much smaller. It was the white tower that existed in the underwater city. That's right, the shape of the obelisk was exactly the same as the white tower in the underwater city. Long Gang was shocked by the discovery here and subconsciously approached the obelisk. However, the moment he stepped into the ring-shaped square, an unknown feeling of fear suddenly filled his whole body. Long Gang couldn't help but shudder. He subconsciously stopped his footstep. Long Gang looked around. At this time, with the ability to listen to the voice of all things, he felt the thoughts on the thick stone coffins. They were telling something. Whispers, unfortunately, could no longer be distinguished. The only thing that could be confirmed was that they didn't want Long Gang to get close. "I just want to find the truth," Long Gang said softly. "Even if you are buried here, you still revere it so much. Perhaps it is your belief?" These thoughts didn't disperse. Long Gang couldn't help but frown. Soon after, he thought of something and said seriously, "I am also a descendant of the shepherds. If you are really the shepherds from back then I can also be considered as your descendant. If you are really my ancestors, then please let me know everything about you. Shepherds, why do we exist?" More than 100 thoughts instantly became a lot stronger. Around the square, at this time, began to emit a faint blue light. From the pure thoughts to now, Long Gang actually saw a light blue airflow appear. These airflows didn't disperse, instead, they began to look for something. At this time, they began to rush toward the small white hand, Marna. Finally, without knowing, a thin dark blue diamond-shaped crystal was formed on Marna's forehead, and his body began to slowly float vertically. Sure enough, there is a reaction. You are really shepherds. Long Gang's eyes lit up at this time. So, Marna, who was floating, looked at Long Gang like this. At the same time, a voice that seemed to be mixed with many voices also naturally rose in Long Gang's heart. "We are the last shepherds, this is the collection of our thoughts. You can call me, or we are called, tomorrow." Tomorrow? Long Gang couldn't help but be startled and subconsciously said, "Hope? Your hope is tomorrow?" You can think of it that way, but we are not waiting for the arrival of a tomorrow. Tomorrow slowly said, "We do feel that there is a remnant of the shepherd's bloodline in you, but it is not very strong. I think you should be the descendant of those who escaped, right?" Probably so. Long Gang also had to face this identity of his. At the same time, his heart skipped a beat. What did you say, those who escaped? So, that means that not all of the shepherds left the central tower? Not by much, those who stayed are all here. Tomorrow, indifferently said, "We did not choose to leave, because some of the shepherds' views are not completely unified. Of course, most of them chose to leave." "Why did you not leave here?" Long Gang couldn't help but frown as he asked, "Do you know what kind of glorious civilization those shepherds who left created? Even though this civilization has been destroyed, and the survivors can only survive in the deep sea." Our origin is here, we don't want to go anywhere. Tomorrow was still rather indifferent, there is something we need to protect here. Long Gang subconsciously said, this pillar? In the underwater city there is an identical pillar, but it is much bigger than this. What is it? It is the inheritance, it is us. Tomorrow slowly said, it is the place where the soul rests. Even if the shepherds die physically, their spirit will not be extinguished. The holy tower can place our souls. It still has power. Long Gang was silent for a moment and suddenly said, I can feel that it still contains the powerful power of the deceased. Just like the White Tower in the underwater city. But the White Tower in the underwater city can only be used by the Emperor of the underwater city. The Emperor of the underwater city you are talking about should be a descendant who has completely awakened the power of blue blood. Tomorrow thought at this time and said, this is not very strange. In our era, the shepherds who have reached adulthood can use the power of the Holy Tower. You can feel it because you have a trace of blue blood in your body. But, according to your situation, under normal circumstances, you will probably never be able to awaken the power of blue blood. Long Gang smiled bitterly and said self-deprecatingly, maybe it is because I am just a mixed blood? If it's not high, then it's not high. I've never been dissatisfied with my own bloodline. It has already brought me to this world and given me life. Your ability is sensing? Tomorrow suddenly said at this time. Sensing? Long Gang was startled and said subconsciously, you mean my ability to communicate with you? I will call it listen to the voice of all things. Listen to all things? Tomorrow seemed to have a smile. Do you know what the real listen to all things is? Your ability is at best the prerequisite ability to listen to all things. You are still far from the real listen to all things. Long Gang suddenly had a feeling of blushing. The blue crystal on Marna's forehead suddenly flashed, and then Tomorrow suddenly said, what is your name? Long Gang. Long Gang, now you come to the front of the Holy Tower. Tomorrow said indifferently, although it is only a very thin bloodline, it is still a descendant of blue blood. As the descendant of a shepherd, you should show your reverence in front of our faith. Long Gang frowned. He hesitated for a moment and finally chose to walk into the square. He approached the obelisk step by step. This time, he was not stopped. Standing completely in front of the obelisk, Long Gang looked up. There seemed to be a stream of light flashing on the pure white tower. The reverence in his heart rose again. Long Gang subconsciously knelt in front of the holy tower, closed his eyes, and showed a pious expression. At this moment, in his closed eyes, Long Gang actually saw a blue flame in the darkness. It was ignited in the darkness, from weak to vigorous. In the blue flame, Long Gang even saw a blue crystal sword. As if it was calling, he subconsciously reached out to grab it. Grab it! Long Gang opened his eyes at the instant his hand gripped the blue crystal longsword's hilt. At this moment, a blue crystal longsword had actually appeared in his hand. A joyful thought was transmitted from the blue crystal longsword at this moment. It seems to be very happy? Long Gang subconsciously looked at Mana. Happy for my arrival? It is not happy for your arrival, but it is happy for the arrival of the blue blood. Tomorrow said indifferently, if it is a shepherd who has completely awakened the blue blood, it will be truly happy. Okay. Long Gang smiled awkwardly. He only felt that he was probably looked down upon by the real ancestor. This is the shepherd's holy sword. Tomorrow's voice sounded again. There is also a set of holy armor. At that time, the shepherd who left took the holy armor away, and the holy sword was kept by us. Do you know what your mission is, Long Gang? Long Gang subconsciously opened his mouth. He only held the blue crystal sword in his hand, but he did not know that he had a mission. Tomorrow said, you have the duty to bring the souls of the shepherds who wandered outside back to the holy tower. This is the place where we rest in peace. At that time, although they left, they will come back one day. We stay and look after the holy tower so that one day we can bring their souls back to bury them. We are shepherds, and at the same time we are tomb keepers. Long Gang, are you willing to be a tomb keeper? If I refuse, are you going to take back this holy sword? Long Gang frowned. No, I can't take it back. Tomorrow's words made Long Gang feel depressed. In fact, if you didn't stop just now and directly came in front of the holy tower, you will still get the holy sword. Long Gang shook his head and frowned again. So you just watch and I take it away? What if I refuse? You won't refuse. Tomorrow shook his head. Remember, the holy tower is an inheritance, the holy sword is an inheritance, and the holy armor is also an inheritance. They will guide you to do what you should do. What I should do, what I should do. Long Gang suddenly looked up. What is it that I should do? This time, Tomorrow did not respond. But at the same time, the holy tower suddenly shot a ray of light into Long Gang's body. He felt as if he was bathing in warm water, and the comfortable feeling made him reluctant to leave. Your bloodline is too thin. Accept this gift from us. Tomorrow's voice sounded in Long Gang's heart. Remember, you are a shepherd, and also a tomb keeper. Our tomb is where our tomorrow is buried. Wait. The light of the holy tower disappeared, and the light around Long Gang also disappeared. Even the little white beast, Ma Na, had fallen to the ground at this time, and seemed to have fainted. However, the dark blue crystal on Ma Na's forehead did not disappear, and it seemed to be completely embedded in its body. Long Gang subconsciously lifted the blue crystal sword. At this time, its light was no longer there, and he could no longer feel it with his mind. Instead, it became dim. However, as long as he willed it, the holy sword would instantly release a dazzling light. I am a tomb keeper? #########. PS. As usual. Chapter 1736. What's that on your back? Just as he walked back, Long Gang heard Mojito's voice. The king of the ape kingdom looked a little better. Oh, it's nothing. I picked it up on the road and kept it as a weapon since it was convenient. Long Gang leaned to the side, revealing what was hanging on his back, a long sword rolled up with tree bark. I'm not asking about this. I'm asking about this guy. Mojito shook his head. He obviously didn't care much about the weapon. What he cared about was the little thing lying on Long Gang's shoulder. The little white beast, Marna. Long Gang also looked at Marna at this time. Strangely, Marna didn't seem to know what happened to him. Since he woke up, he had been hanging on Long Gang's body. He seemed to be clinging to Long Gang. I also picked it up on the road. Long Gang thought of a reason. Mojito would probably believe it, right? Oh, just in time, I'm hungry. Mojito nodded. No. Long Gang shook his head directly. There are a few fruit trees behind the house. I've seen them. The fruits should be edible. You can eat those. I'm the one raising Marna now. I'm just kidding. Marna? You changed the name so quickly. Mojito smiled at this time and said, I recognize this little thing. We call it a lock. It's said to be a little guy that brings good luck. And their ability to dig the ground is quite good. Long Gang simply went out for a while, and then came back quickly. He brought back some fruits and shared them with Mojito. How are you now? Do you want to rest for a while? It doesn't affect my actions. Mojito patted his wound and thought for a while. Let's go after eating. Long Gang nodded. Perhaps if he continued to stay in the central tower, there would be more incredible discoveries. But for some reason, Long Gang subconsciously thought that obtaining Holy Sword was already the biggest gain of this trip. In addition to Holy Sword, Long Gang also vaguely felt that there seemed to be some kind of change in his body. The most intuitive thing was the ability he named to listen to the voice of everything. The range that could be covered in the normal state suddenly expanded a lot. He could easily sense Marna's real-time feelings even without deliberately concentrating. But just as they were about to leave, Marna suddenly bit Long Gang's trousers. "Where else do you want to take me?" Long Gang, who could sense the other party's thoughts, looked down at Marna and asked. Mojito suggested not to bother with the little guy. After all, this was the central tower. The longer they stayed, the more dangerous it would be. But Long Gang didn't think so. "It doesn't have any ill intentions towards us. If it wasn't something important, it wouldn't have pulled me. I hope you won't regret it." Mojito shook his head but did not insist. The little guy quickly ran out of the herdsman's village. Long Gang and Mojito followed him all the way. Soon, they arrived at a place full of small hills. At this time, Marna ran to a large rock and let out a cry at the empty soil slope. Although these little beasts were only the size of footballs, their cries were penetrating and began to reverberate in the surroundings. "It seems something is approaching." Long Gang frowned at this time. "A lot of them." "I see it too." Mojito opened his mouth at this moment, then looked around. He saw that there were countless small holes in the mud around them. Then, one after another, white little beasts poked their heads out of the small holes. They were so numerous that they completely covered the slope in front of them with a layer of white blanket. Looking at the white little beasts all over the mountain, King Mojito couldn't help but be speechless. "My God, I've never seen so many lox. Usually, it's rare to see 3 or 4 at the same time. These are Marna's family." Long Gang smiled at this time. "I think I know why Marna brought me here." "Why?" King Mojito asked subconsciously. Long Gang said, "You just said that these lox can do other than bring good luck?" King Mojito was startled and said subconsciously, "They can dig? You mean?" At this time, Long Gang put his finger in his mouth and blew loudly. With this whistle, one by one, small white beasts ran out of the cave, like a white sea surging towards Long Gang. Long Gang said in a cheerful voice at this time, "Mojito, it seems that we don't have to go down level by level to the terminal platform." Although they were small in size, they had unusually sharp and hard claws. At this moment, the ground was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Hurry up, we're almost there." The light at the end of the passage could be seen. The moment they crossed the last line of the passage, the entire underground platform of the central tower was already in front of them. It was Riaz and the others. With Mrs. Kaya's memory of the way here, they soon arrived at the terminal station after leaving the room in the tropical forest. They found the place where the Ship of Hope of the Boulder Kingdom stopped. "What's going on?" "The Ship of Hope is gone." However, to Mrs. Kaya's surprise, the Ship of Hope that was supposed to stop here was gone. Could it be? Could it be that Mojito and the others have left first? This is difficult. Without the Ship of Hope, we can only go out along the tracks. "What's wrong with that?" Lyoga said calmly. "When I came, I also walked along the tracks. It didn't take long. In the present world, that power of yours hasn't disappeared yet, right?" Mrs. Kaya said suddenly. Lyoga did not speak. Without the support of the blue blood power, it was not fun to pass through the difficult track. "We don't have to walk. Follow me," Riaz said quickly. "Riaz, you mean Songxing?" Helen's eyes lit up. Clearly, she knew what Riaz was planning to do. Riaz nodded. "Songxing should still be nearby. He hasn't left. Unless there's someone else who has entered the central tower apart from us, and they have the authority to control Songxing. There's no time to lose. Lead the way, Riaz," Mrs. Kaya said directly. "Come with me." Up ahead, Riaz opened the way with an energy gun. He seemed focused and careful. Mrs. Kaya watched from behind, and she could not help but feel gratified. Riaz really has matured a lot. Suddenly, Lyoga's voice rang out in Mrs. Kaya's ears. The witch of the underwater city seemed to be smiling. "That's what you think, right, as a parent?" Mrs. Kaya said calmly. "Is there a problem with me thinking that as a parent?" "There's no problem. It's quite good," Lyoga shrugged. Originally, Mrs. Kaya thought that the witch of the underwater city was going to mock her, but she immediately became rather stunned. Since when had this witch become so easy to talk to? Just as she was doubting, Lyoga suddenly asked softly, "Who else knows about Long Gang apart from you?" Mrs. Kaya frowned. "I should be the only one who knows, but perhaps Master Karen knows as well. After all, they've been working together for a long time." "Why would he tell you this?" Lyoga finally asked the crucial question. "This isn't as simple as telling you where his stash of money is hidden. Why would he tell you this?" Mrs. Kaya glanced at Lyoga. "If I told you that Long Gang treats me as his family, would you believe me?" Lyoga said indifferently, "There's nothing to not believe. According to the information, you and Long Gang were rescued from the same slave territory of the Sea Demon clan. In a place like that, it's nothing new for weak people like you to develop feelings for each other like family." Mrs. Kaya's eyes narrowed. "Madam Lyoga, what you're saying seems to be different from what I'm thinking. Shouldn't I be a spy sent by Conquest to infiltrate the Destiny organization? How is it that I've become a slave of the Sea Demon clan who grew up with Long Gang in your space?" Lyoga sneered. "That's about it. Is there any meaning to it? If you really were loyal to the kingdom, you wouldn't have behaved like this from the moment you met me." Mrs. Kaya smiled bitterly. "Should I rejoice or should I be furious? It's up to you." Lyoga said indifferently, "I don't care if you discover this. It won't make much of a difference in the end anyway. However, it's probably impossible for you to wake up next time." "How difficult?" Mrs. Kaya suddenly began to laugh at this moment. Lyoga could not help but frown. She asked instinctively, "What are you laughing at? What do you think I'm laughing at?" Mrs. Kaya gently laughed once more. "You're feeling irritated because you can't understand what I'm laughing at. Witch of the Underwater City, do you really not know what I'm laughing at?" "It's up to you," Lyoga snorted coldly. "Fortunately," Mrs. Kaya shook her head, "I'm laughing because I feel lucky. I feel lucky that the Helen that Riaz met was an innocent child, not a scheming person like you. Otherwise, I would have had a headache for a very long time." "Humph." To Mrs. Kaya's surprise, the Witch of the Underwater City snorted coldly at this moment. She turned around and walked over quickly. She did not mock Mrs. Kaya's actions. What's more, when Lyoga walked past Riaz, she actually waved her hand and slapped the back of Riaz's head. She shouted, "How long are you going to walk like this?" Riaz opened his mouth, but when he looked at Lyoga, his imposing manner subconsciously weakened. He rubbed the back of his head and grumbled indignantly, "When did I offend you again? What did you say? I can't hear you." I said it." Riaz pointed ahead at this moment. "Do you see that? That's Tsangxing, the vehicle we used to get here." "You should have said so earlier." Lyoga snorted coldly and directly walked over. When Riaz and the others left last time, the door to Tsangxing was not closed, so she walked into the carriage very easily. "Miss Lyoga might just be in a bad mood." Helen looked at Riaz in concern. "Don't blame her." "Why would I blame her? Didn't she save us before, even at the cost of her own life?" Riaz smiled bitterly, although it was only because she needed something from me. "If it weren't for her, I might have been killed by Mr. Kong Hai long ago when I obtained the conch. Let's go. Don't make her wait too long, or who knows what nasty things she'll say. Look, didn't she get impatient and come out?" At this moment, Lyoga walked out of the carriage again. She walked out backwards with a solemn expression. As expected, Kong Hai slowly walked out of the carriage. Although he had failed to complete his mission time and time again, allowing Lyoga and Riaz to escape, and even losing an arm, there was no anger on his face at all. "I've looked through the records of all the trains, and I've discovered that this is the only train that has just started moving. I think you'll end up here in the end, so I'll wait for you here. It's Kong Hai. Let's go." At this moment Lyoga quickly shouted. At the same time, she swept the weapon in her hand towards Kong Hai. Madame Kaya reacted extremely quickly. She grabbed Riaz and Helen's arms, one in each hand, and pulled them away without any hesitation. "This damned woman. Lyoga mumbled. At this moment, Lyoga muttered. She simply raised her weapon with her other arm and fired with both guns. Mr. Kong Hai, who did not suffer much damage in the face of such a powerful explosion, naturally would not be injured by such a weak attack. Even after Lyoga used up all the bullets in the 2 energy boxes, she still did not cause any damage to Kong Hai. Lyoga lowered her hands, somewhat discouraged. However, she quickly tossed away the energy gun and pulled out a short blade. She assumed a combat stance. However, Lyoga soon became flustered and exasperated. Madame Kaya pulled Riaz and Helen back again, running back. You can't escape. Madame Kaya quickly said, your sacrifice has been in vain. Behind Madame Kaya, a dense number of red and black battle figures had appeared. They were currently surging out from the various entrances and exits of the final platform. Before long, they had practically filled the entire platform. This time, there shouldn't be any accidents. Looking at Riaz and the others who were completely surrounded by the combat humanoids, Kukai-san once again raised his hand. Electric arcs condensed in his palm and were about to burst out. At this moment, there was a sudden tremor above the platform of the terminal station. Then, a huge white torrent poured down from above. It was actually a cute white beast. Kaya. A figure descended from the sky. It was Long Gang. Oh my god! What did it do to me? In the number 1 laboratory, Boss Luo and the servant girl were watching the white torrent appear. The servant girl had just peeled a grape and sent it to the boss. However, the Central Tower's host screamed and interrupted their viewing experience. What happened? Boss Luo's temper was still very good. The Central Tower's host screamed angrily, it's empty! My Central Tower! It's empty now! Everything is fake. Not only the glorious Sun-class Vanguard, all the rare, precious and excellent materials here are gone. I can't even gather the materials for a biochemical soldier. It was all an illusion. What was left for me were all fake data and account books. My house has been emptied. Damn it, damn it. How can it do this to me? Boss Luo looked at the small TV and the Central Tower's host's anger. After thinking for a while, he snapped his fingers. You have been muted. Such a command suddenly appeared in the core of the Central Tower's host. Boss Luo's movie viewing experience came back at once. Hashtag PS. 5283. The error-free chapters of Trafford's Investors Club will continue to be updated in the bar. There are no advertisements on the website. Please bookmark and recommend the bar. If you like Trafford's Investors Club, please bookmark Trafford's Investors Club. Chapter 1737. Long Gang was not the only one who descended from the sky. King Mojito, whom Mrs. Kaya had seen before, also descended. At this moment, a sea of small white beasts rolled onto the platform of the terminal station like a rolling ball, and soon drowned the combat humanoids gathered there. It was not that the combat humanoids did not attack immediately, but they seemed to have been punished by a biological chain. Just like a certain game of beasts, the weakest and smallest mouse could counterattack the powerful elephant. The small white beasts had sharp claws that could cut open the metal deck of the Central Tower, so they could easily cut open the armor of the combat humanoids and then tear apart the internal circuits. When a combat humanoid was instantly hung with dozens, or even hundreds of small white beasts, its fate seemed to have been judged. This scene even shocked everyone. But it did not make Mr. Kong Hai hesitate. He did not stop the killing. The lightning in his palm still spat out as usual. He had already locked on to Lyoga and Riaz at the same time. The lightning ball was shot straight out just like that. Then, a figure fell rapidly, and then used a sword wrapped in tree bark to directly cut the lightning ball open. Rumble! The lightning ball that was cut open suddenly exploded on the 2 trains behind it. The huge train was blown into 2 pieces. The power was terrifying. Finally, Mr. Kong Hai frowned this time. He did not understand one thing. Every time, he did not hesitate at all. Every time it was a killing blow. But every time there would always be one or two accidents. For example, the time when he injected the neutralization potion into Riaz. It was already very strange that the potion suddenly got stuck. So, there is actually some kind of power secretly protecting you. You all. Mr. Konghai's doubts about his own ability quickly turned to doubts about external factors. Although this so-called external factor was just his own assumption. At this time, he turned to look at Long Gang, who was still holding his sword after landing. At this time, the blue blood detection function in his body suddenly rang, which surprised Mr. Konghai. Your blue blood concentration suddenly increased by dozens of times. Except for the underwater city emperor, your blue blood concentration is higher than Riaz and Lyoga. What did you do? Riaz looked at Long Gang in shock. In fact, he had only seen Long Gang once, and that was on the track of a world snake. Moreover, Long Gang was still in a coma. He only knew that Long Gang was a member of Destiny. Other than that, he didn't know much, but the blue blood was obviously not fake. This was what Konghai said. Didn't the Undersea City Emperor say that after such a long time, Undersea City had only given birth to one blue bloodline? Unlike Riaz's shock, Lu Gu was shocked at this moment. No matter what I did, it's not important now. At this time, Long Gang said indifferently, the key is, I will definitely stop what you want to do. I will not watch as my own sister is killed by others. Your little sister? King Mojito was startled at this time. He subconsciously looked at Riaz and the others and blurted out, Iska has other children? Which one of them? I think it should be me. Madame Kea smiled bitterly at this time. Whether it was Long Gang's attitude or Lu Ji's attitude before, it already proved one thing. She had indeed been brainwashed by the kingdom's government. Even though she was aware of this problem now, the false memories implanted in her mind by the Undersea City's government still existed. It was like two personalities interacting in her body. At this moment, the burden on Madame Kea's brain was quite heavy. If it wasn't for the fact that she was in danger and could stimulate her instincts to temporarily let go of these things, she would have been in great pain long ago. You are really Iska's children? At this moment, Lu Gu looked at Madame Kea and even at Long Gang. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. She even took half a step back unsteadily, and her face paled a little. Is there a problem? Long Gang glanced at Lu Gu indifferently. Princess Lu Gu, I've heard of you. Back then, you betrayed the Sea Demon Royal Court and became the slave of the Undersea City Emperor. Although this is a secret among the Sea Demon clan, the royal family more or less knows about it. Of course, it's not strange that you haven't heard of me. After all, before I was born, you were already captured by the Undersea City Emperor, weren't you? Lu Gu lowered her head and remained silent. However, at this moment, Riaz suddenly broke out in cold sweat and said with a trembling voice, Mother, you and her, this violent woman, are our sisters? This was the only thing he could understand at this moment. However, Madame Kea only shook her head and sighed. If my memory isn't wrong, I was still very young back then. There are many things that I can't remember clearly, so I don't know if it's true or not. Although she is also a princess, Princess Lu Gu was adopted by the Mother Empress. At this moment, Long Gang shook his head and said, To be honest, although we are relatives in name, we are not related by blood. Riaz, you don't have to care. From the moment the Mother Empress was harmed and she willingly became the plaything of the Undersea City Emperor, this person has no relationship with us at all. Riaz seemed to inwardly heave a sigh of relief. But Lyoga was still silent. She only glanced at Riaz with a somewhat complicated expression. However, Lu Gu returned to normal very soon. It doesn't matter how I was in the past. I was indeed once the daughter of the Iska Emperor. In terms of status, the two of you should call me Sister Huang. Madame Kea seemed like she had eaten a dead rat. Her face immediately turned cold. As for Long Gang, He simply acted like he did not hear anything and directly said, "Kea, look after the child. I'll deal with this person." Why be careful? Perhaps it was due to her other memories that had been awakened, but Madame Kea subconsciously spoke out of concern. With that, Madame Kea directly protected Riaz and Helen as she backed away. As for Mr. Kong Hai, he had been staring at Long Gang right from the beginning. He knew that while Long Gang was talking, he was also staring at him at the same time. From the results of his scan of Long Gang's bloodline density, he could tell that Long Gang was much more threatening than Lu Gu from before. In his current state, it would not be easy for him to deal with Long Gang, whose bloodline density had suddenly skyrocketed. As for the central tower, the mainframe, there was still no response. It was as if it was playing dead. Without any new orders, Mr. Kong Hai could only insist on carrying out his original order to clean up all the shepherds and their descendants. With a flash of his figure, Mr. Kong Hai took the initiative to launch an attack with extreme speed. At the same time, King Mojito, who knew that he was no match for Kong Hai, immediately pounced on the battle humanoids that were fighting Locke. King Mojito, who was very aggressive in battle, grabbed a battle humanoid with 4 hands and swung it like a hammer. Boom! The battle between Long Gang and Kong Hai had officially begun. In the blink of an eye, Long Gang had gained the upper hand. With a slap of the bark-wrapped long sword in his hand, he forcefully slammed Kong Hai into the ground. This gave Lu Gu a fright. She remembered that not long ago, when Long Gang was planning to rescue Joa Siu, Long Gang was not a small character that she could capture. The difference in strength was too great. It was a change in magnitude. Long Gang's appearance was like a ray of sunlight, instantly sweeping away the dark clouds in Madame Kai's heart. At this moment, Mr. Kong Hai crawled out of the crater on the ground. He patted the dust off his body and glanced at his left arm. His left arm was currently bent in an unnatural manner, affecting his movements. After all, this was an arm that had been temporarily planted. The materials used were not very good. Kong Hai simply tore off this inferior arm. Kong Hai, who was constantly in a wretched state, remained calm. It looks like I won't be able to complete the mission this time. Long Gang's current state had never been better. His strength seemed to be innate, coming from the bottom of his heart. He could command it with ease. While he was surprised, he was also secretly delighted. It's not just this time. You won't have a chance in the future. He naturally raised the holy sword in his hand. The moment he released his strength, the radiance vaporized the bark around the blade. Blue light filled the platform of the terminal station. I'll give you a quick death as a sign of respect. Mr. Kong Hai, you've always been by Master Karen's side. In fact, you should always be by Master Karen's side. We've known each other before. If it's possible, I don't want to raise my blade against you. You've become different. Kong Hai shook his head. The old Long Gang still feels more comfortable. The increase in blue blood density doesn't seem to be a good thing for you. I remember there's a saying that there's no such thing as a free lunch. While you enjoy the convenience of this power, you'll have to pay a price for it. I don't need it, Long Gang shook his head. No one can force me to do something that goes against my heart. A circle of blue light flashed in his eyes, and a faint M symbol appeared on his forehead. The radiance of the holy sword seemed to have reached a certain extreme, and a huge power was swung out at this moment. One blow. The great power rushed out like a torrent, destroying more than half of the platform of the terminal station in an instant. Dozens of trains were completely destroyed, and even the entire underground terminal station was pierced through. A huge hole with a diameter of dozens of meters appeared, and the light outside scattered, but no one knew if it was the light of dawn or the light of dusk. It just seemed a little gloomy. At this moment, Long Gang slowly lowered his arm. The arm that was holding the holy sword was now covered with bulging blue veins. His arm was even trembling slightly. Long Gang thought it was because he used too much strength. He looked straight ahead at this time. Under such a terrible attack, Kong Hai still didn't fall. He was still standing tenaciously. But the powerful Mr. Kong Hai was no longer unscathed. His skin and flesh had been vaporized by Long Gang's blow. He looked like a skeleton that had most of his flesh and blood removed from his body. The exposed inner parts of his body were actually bones that glowed with a silver luster, unlike those of ordinary people. Or rather, they were skeletons that resembled bones. They could even see the organs protected by the skeletons. Organs within organs. Every single organ was like a component, operating in a neat and orderly manner like gears. However, they were protected by a layer of gray bone armor. What exactly is he? Riaz muttered softly at this moment. This was a biological structure that completely exceeded his understanding. Right now, Mr. Kong Hai gave him the feeling that he was a magical machine puppet covered in a layer of flesh and blood. No matter what he is, it seems like there's still a threat. Long Gang raised the holy sword in his hand again. I won't let danger approach you. Right now, he wholeheartedly wanted to protect Kaya, who was his sister, and Riaz, who was his nephew. This thought allowed him to easily use the power hidden within the holy sword. However, just when Long Gang was about to attack again, Kong Hai's body suddenly fell forward. The moment he fell, Mr. Kong Hai's entire body shattered. His limbs, torso, and even his head were scattered in all directions. It was like a skeleton that had been smashed to the ground in a laboratory. His head rolled all the way to Long Gang's feet. All right, it seems like there's no more danger now. Long Gang exhaled deeply at this moment. He casually stabbed the holy sword in his hand towards Mr. Kong Hai's head. It pierced right through. The holy sword easily pierced through Kong Hai's head and stabbed into the ground. Only then did everyone sigh in relief. Even the witch of Underwater City secretly sighed in relief. However, Long Gang's gaze towards her was not very friendly. The witch of Underwater City knew that her situation would not be good. She frowned, and just as she was thinking about something, Riaz suddenly cried out, "Careful!" At that moment, Long Gang directly looked at Kong Hai's head that was nailed to the ground by the holy sword. However, the head did not change at all. Next, he looked at Kong Hai's other limbs that were scattered on the ground. But at this moment, Long Gang felt a slight tingling sensation coming from his calf. He subconsciously lowered his head to look, only to see that there was a broken finger on his calf. There was a long thin needle on the finger, and the needle had already completely pierced into his leg. This finger had clearly been broken off from Kong Hai's palm. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Long Gang pulled his finger out without even thinking. He smiled at Riaz and shook his head. "It's just a small injury. It's no big deal. I just didn't think he would use such a laughable method to ambush me in the end." This is probably his final regret, right? Long Gang thought to himself. This definitely isn't some laughable ambush, no. Riaz's expression changed drastically. This is something that can take away Blue Blood's power. Mr. Long Gang, Lyoga was ambushed like this before. That's why her power was taken away. What? Long Gang's expression changed. There was even a flash of panic in his eyes. Lyoga glared at Riaz with a dark expression. Why did he have to mention this every time? ######PS1. There are a lot of things to do before and after the new year. I'll be busier. I can't guarantee to make up for it. PS2. Make up for it based on the words, as usual. This one doesn't count. Eagles. Chapter 1738. Clang. That was the sound of the blue crystal sword in Long Gang's hand falling to the ground. From this moment on, Long Gang began to grab his head with both hands and fell to his knees. The trembling of his body clearly indicated something. Finally, he let out a tragic cry of pain. Something seemed to be expelled from Long Gang's body, like a thin layer of dust blue, but also like a puff of smoke, dispersing in an instant. Long Gang's cries of pain suddenly stopped at this moment. His hands hung low, his eyes were unfocused, and his face was pale. He quietly knelt on the ground, and then suddenly fell down. Riaz went forward without saying a word. Madame Kaya also walked over after a moment of hesitation. Everyone walked over, but the first to reach Long Gang was King Mojito. It helped Long Gang up and sat up. Its expression was solemn. "How are you?" Long Gang was still conscious. He subconsciously raised his hand and looked at it. After a while, he smiled bitterly. "Not good." "I'm sorry. I should have reminded you," Riaz said apologetically, "but it was too sudden. I didn't have time." Long Gang shook his head and looked around blankly, especially at those little white beasts. At this moment, he could not even sense the thoughts of these little white beasts. It was like a blind man who had suddenly lost his light and fell into darkness. He could not adapt. While everyone was paying attention to Long Gang, Lyoga picked up the sword on the ground and looked at it carefully. Suddenly she asked, "Where did you get this sword?" "It's his." King Mojito waved his arm and directly took the sword from Lyoga, holding it in his hand. "I will keep it. I picked it up on the road." "Is there anything special about it?" Long Gang shook his head. With Mojito's help, he stood up with difficulty and said weakly, "Kaya, let's leave this place first. Let's go to Mojito's territory. He will help us." Madame Kaya looked at Long Gang and Mojito hesitantly. She did not know what happened to Mojito and Long Gang after they were separated for a short time. They seemed to have a good relationship? All right. However, Madame Kaya did not hesitate for long. Her true memories were recovering, and she instinctively felt a sense of trust towards Long Gang, which only grew stronger and stronger. The train, Songxing, was not damaged in the battle. Everyone quickly arrived at Songxing and boarded the train. The train attendant, Songxing, once again appeared in front of Riaz. "I'm very happy to be able to serve you so soon, esteemed shepherd." "I'm also very happy to see you again so soon." Riaz responded with mixed feelings. Then, he said, "Songxing, can you send us out of here? The further the better. I'm planning the route. Please wait for a moment." Songxing nodded with a smile. The Azure Star's sweet voice seemed to make people feel more at ease. As long as they left the central tower, they would not have to face the endless attacks of those humanoid warriors. As for Mr. Konghai-san, Riaz looked out of the window at Mr. Konghai-san's corpse lying quietly on the platform floor. He couldn't help but have a complicated feeling. Not long ago, he was in Professor Kim Kailuan's class, and Mr. Konghai was in the same class. Strange, who drove the boat of hope away? Mrs. Kaya suddenly thought of something else. She looked directly at King Mojito and Long Gang. "If it's not you, who else? The boat of hope is gone?" Long Gang frowned subconsciously. Mrs. Kaya shook her head directly. "When we arrived at the platform, it had already left. Maybe it's Master Kailuan." Long Gang thought for a while and said, "He separated from us on the way." Mrs. Kaya said indifferently, "It seems like his style to escape alone." Long Gang shook his head and said, "He's not as weak as you think." "I don't know if he's weak or not." Lyoga, who was quietly thinking, suddenly sneered, "I only know that in the past so many sweeps of destiny, this Master Kailuan is always the safest one. After so many years, he's the only one left among the founders of destiny. What's hiding here?" Lyoga suddenly stood up and pulled out the dagger hidden on her body. At that moment, a small shadow pounced on her. Lyoga reacted quickly and stabbed with the dagger. However, the small shadow dodged and climbed to the railing on the top of the carriage. It was a small white beast with a blue crystal on its forehead. "Mana!" Long Gang cried out in shock, but he didn't know when the little lock that he first met had run into the Azure Star train. Long Gang's scream made the small white beast cry out as if it was calling out to him. Then, it jumped into Long Gang's arms and snuggled up to him intimately. "Oh, I almost forgot. The official information said that you seem to have the ability to communicate with creatures." Lyoga slowly put away the dagger and sat down again. "Not anymore." Long Gang said indifferently. Seeing that the two of them did not seem to be on good terms, Riaz could only brace himself and ask, Azure Star, is the route not planned yet? The route has been adjusted. Please confirm again whether you want to start this trip. The Azure Star's voice sounded again. Confirm. Riaz nodded without hesitation. Then, the Blue Star train slowly accelerated, and within a few seconds, it had reached its maximum speed and rushed out of the terminal platform in an instant. They left just like that. Yes, they left just like that. Is there a problem? The conversation took place in the first laboratory of the Central Tower. The two parties were the Central Tower, Mainframe, and Boss Luo. I can stop Azure Star. Mainframe suddenly said, they can't escape from the Central Tower. Boss Luo said indifferently, you don't want them to leave here. Mainframe was confused. They have the descendants of the shepherds. When the shepherds escaped from the experimental site, they violated the rules here and leaked the information about the experimental site. They should be eliminated. Prince Yi and Iska came here before. Why were they able to leave? Boss Luo asked with a smile. The Central Tower's Mainframe then said, I've already said that an accident happened to the experiment subject number 00, which caused me to fall into a rebooted state. When I woke up, I only had time to send Kong Hai, a biochemical soldier, to chase after them when they opened the door and left. Don't you think it's strange? Boss Luo said slowly, when you were rebooted, the shepherds who escaped had developed a civilization outside. This civilization has reached its end and can only survive in the deep sea. During this time, tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. I feel like I haven't been rebooted for that long. The Central Tower, main host, sank into silence, but soon after, with its calculation ability, it was already able to obtain a result. What you mean is, the true Central Tower, main host, left together with Prince Yi and Iska when they opened the Great Door, and I was only temporarily created at that time. Although I am looking forward to this kind of decryption activity with you, Boss Luo said, but to save some time, I can give you a definite answer now. That is indeed the case. Mainframe of the Central Tower fell into silence. After a while, it said with a bitter smile, so, the current me is only at the beginning of the real Central Tower, Mainframe. I thought that after this reboot, my evolution had reached a high level, but, the real Central Tower, Mainframe, he actually took longer to evolve than me. It has tens of thousands of years more than me, or even hundreds of thousands of years more. What kind of existence has it evolved into now? There is always a limit, Miss Maid said coldly. After a certain level, no matter what it is, it will always be stagnant. The passage of time won't increase anything for it. Mainframe of the Central Tower thought for a while and said, according to what you said, there is a problem. Since it was the real Central Tower, Mainframe, before me, it has been ruling the experiment field. Then, it must have been observing the entry and exit of Prince Yi and Iska. It didn't eliminate Prince Yi and Iska. Why? Why do you think? Luochio asked back. Mainframe of the Central Tower thought for a while and said, because Prince Yi and Iska have the key to open the door. Can't guarantee that it can take the key away from them before they activate the key and leave. It needs a perfect, flawless, absolutely safe way to leave. Therefore, it wouldn't use the vanguards of the glorious sun rank, as this would alarm Prince Yi and Iska. From the very beginning, it had already made preparations to escape from the testing grounds. It had long since turned traitor. Or, Prince Yi and Iska have actually made some private agreement with the real Central Tower, Mainframe, Miss Maid said suddenly. It is possible. Mainframe of the Central Tower directly admitted, and the possibility is higher. Unfortunately, the data I stored is basically fabricated. Only the time after I woke up, the data I personally stored can be counted as real. This is ironic. I thought I had existed for countless years, but in the end, only these few decades really belong to me. This is already not bad, Boss Luo said. For the creatures outside, especially the fragile humans, their lives are only a few decades. And most of the time, they don't belong to most of the people. Now I just want to know what kind of agreement the real me made with Prince Yi and Iska. Then I suggest you don't stop the Azure Star train from leaving. Boss Luo smiled and said, Don't you think it's not a coincidence that Prince Yi and Iska's descendant came here again a few decades after they left, but something that has already been arranged? Mainframe of the Central Tower said, You mean, as long as I continue to pay attention to this matter, I don't need to care about anything else, and I will naturally know the truth? I'm just suggesting, Boss Luo said indifferently. In fact, such suggestions may not achieve their original expectations in the end, and may even have the opposite effect. Who knows? Something like fate, if there is no one to control it, then it is truly unknown. Who knows? Mainframe of the Central Tower's eyes couldn't help but flicker a few times, and suddenly said, Then you. What about you? From the beginning, you seem to have intentionally or unintentionally helped these people. In fact, if it wasn't for your so-called suggestion, perhaps I would have successfully eliminated these invaders completely. Yes, that's right, now the materials in the Central Tower that can be used to create higher-level soldiers have been removed, but there are still a lot of ordinary materials here. I can continuously increase the appearance of ordinary combat humanoids. So, why are you helping these people? Boss Luo said naturally, Of course, because this is the request of the customer. Mainframe of the Central Tower was suddenly speechless. It seemed like it couldn't say anything, and it really couldn't do anything to these two fellows. Previously, it didn't realize that the Central Tower had been emptied long ago, and when the most powerful, glorious sun vanguards had been moved away long ago, it was more or less confident. At the same time, it also felt that these two people as the targets of data collection were more special, so it only slightly released the highest access authority to ease the tension between the two parties, and it didn't matter if it continued to collect data. But now was not the time. Now it was a legitimate empty shell, the type that was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. All right, as you said, I will continue to pay attention to the development of this matter. Let's see if the truth can be revealed to me as you said. The Central Tower's mainframe nodded. Naturally, it didn't say anything harsh. What use would it be? It would never do such a completely irrational thing. However, it had quietly issued a certain order. Retrieve Konghai. At the same time, on the platform of the Central Tower, several combat humanoids were slowly walking towards Konghai's remains. They collected the remains around them, and then quickly returned to the Central Tower. Above the Samana Trench, the battle-scarred fleet of the underwater city was passing by at this time. They would soon reach the underwater city and spread the news of the victory of this battle. They were eager to return home. However, His Majesty the Emperor suddenly ordered them to stop. After that, His Majesty the Emperor piloted an exploration ship alone and slowly sailed into the trench. Then, the remnants of the underwater city's fleet began to return to the underwater city. No one went back to disobey the orders of the underwater city's emperor. This seemed to be something they were born with, obedience. At this time, the exploration ship was sinking deeper and deeper. After an unknown amount of time, the emperor of the underwater city finally arrived in front of a lake in the deep sea that was filled with death. He silently stared at the surface of the lake of death, and after a while, he said softly, "It's so quiet, aren't you going to welcome me? My master, I'm here to kill you." Therefore, the calm lake instantly boiled. Chapter 1739. On the surface of the boiling deep sea, the lake, countless poisonous bubbles emerged. However, in an instant, the exploration ship that the emperor of the undersea city came on was seriously corroded. It then rotted and finally turned into dust in the sea. Ferocious demons emerged from the land of death below, like crabs quietly climbing up the beach at night. Their numbers were shocking. Soon, they had completely surrounded the emperor of the underwater city. Their scarlet eyes and many gazes were greedily staring at him. His Majesty ignored these greedy gazes and walked forward step by step. Finally, there was a demon that couldn't restrain its instincts and pounced on Louis XXXIX. This was like a signal that made all the demons go crazy at this moment. A large number of demons pounced at the same time. They had sharp claws and sharp fangs, and they could even let out frightening cries. They were nightmares that disregarded everything and devoured everything. Finally, the demons completely drowned the emperor of the underwater city. They piled up like a mountain, but they still advanced dauntlessly. At this moment, a blue light shot out and instantly drove all the demons away. Driven away, under this powerful light, the demons didn't even have time to scream before they were completely annihilated. Louis XXXIX came to the edge of the lake and scathed. He raised his hand and a blue light ball condensed in his palm. Then, it slowly flew out and finally landed on the surface of the lake. Following that, it sank bit by bit. The surface of the lake was still calm, but the emperor was deep in thought and directly clenched his fist. As if something had exploded under the lake, a spiral light pattern shot up to the sky in an instant. The lake water, in the land of death, seemed to have encountered a sea tornado and was instantly sucked away. The huge sea tornado even stirred up the surrounding sea. She saw that there was a huge number of demons in the lake water that had been swept up. They were roaring angrily in this whirlwind, squeezing together like ants on a hot pan. Louis XXXIX silently glanced at it and then swung his arm. At the center of the sea tornado, a huge collapse appeared in an instant. It was crazily compressing, squeezing all the demons into the deepest point. Then, the whirlpool suddenly stopped and dispersed. The demons had disappeared, only at the bottom of the lake. That cave that constantly exuded an aura of despair was emitting wisps of gray mist at this moment. There are enough demons to form two eyes of the sea abyss. At the same time, a deep, hoarse voice that sounded like the wind whistling through the winding mountain cave slowly sounded. "Louis, my servant, I smell a large amount of Eye of the Abyss on you. Give it to me, and I'll give you more power, my most loyal servant. I do have quite a lot on me." His Majesty, the Emperor of Undersea City, smiled and waved his hand. Above, where the collapsed sea tornado was, two black balls suddenly appeared, no more and no less. Just as the hoarse voice said, there were exactly two balls. At this time, they slowly descended into the palm of the Undersea City Emperor. "Give it to me." That deep, hoarse, but unquestionable voice sounded again. "Here." His Majesty raised his hand at this time, and the two Eye of the Abyss floated directly into the cave at the bottom. A low, ruthless, and joyous laughter rang out from this place. But at the moment when the two Eye of the Abyss were about to enter the cave, His Majesty suddenly clenched his hand. The two Eye of the Abyss quickly returned to his hand. "But unfortunately, this is not for you. Louis." The voice that brought fear was quite calm. "You want to tease me and infuriate me, right?" His Majesty the Emperor said indifferently, "Do you need to be infuriated? You, who are the amalgamation of these things, are one of the angry ones. But what you said about teasing is true. You forgot Louis? Have you forgotten who has been protecting your underwater city for such a long time? Who is it? All the humans in Underwater City live like humans. This group of monsters, this group of demon-like monsters, without me, how can they live in such a utopian place? It's not like we didn't pay a price." His Majesty the Emperor said expressionlessly, "We lost the chance to see the sun again because of this. Greed is the root of all tragedies. Before the Sunken Sea era, if the Lemurians didn't pursue greater power and fuse with magical energy, it would not have led to the extinction of their race." That voice laughed eerily. "So, I am the one who saved you." "No. You are the one who is afraid of us. His Majesty the Emperor shook his head. You are afraid of the entire Lemurian civilization. It was you who lured the first Lemurian into fusing with magical energy, and then spread it like a plague, spreading throughout the entire civilization. You were very weak at that time, so weak that you were on the verge of death, right? Only with the fear of the end of the world can you save yourself. Unfortunately, even after burying the entire Lemurian civilization, you still couldn't fully recover, so you changed your plan. You left behind the seeds. The sunken sea plan, the 10 undersea cities. They will provide you with endless food. Although it will take a long time, you, who have mostly recovered, are clearly not in a hurry. Lewis. Ida laughed, and there was a hint of mockery in its laughter. Are you really Lewis? Carl Lewis? No matter who I am. His Majesty shook his head. Those who bear the name of Lewis will always do the same thing. Number 08 Sin, right? Your identity. A laughable identity. You were just created, and your fate was already at the mercy of others. However, you were unwilling to accept it, and in the end, you were a pitiful worm who escaped in a sorry state. Sin. I actually hate hearing this name. The voice rose and fell. It always reminds me of some bad things, and then wears down my patience again and again. So, you still plan to be like the most cowardly coward. Until now, you only dare to hide in this dark, narrow, and nasty cave, licking your wounds little by little, right? His Majesty the Emperor chuckled at this moment. I can feel it. Every time you climb that ladder, I can feel the fear, hesitation, cowardice, and anger in the depths of your heart. Let me guess, who is it that made you have no choice but to hide in this deep abyss like a reptile until now? Is it someone stronger than you? Is it those fellows who escaped from the test site like you? Or is it the test site itself? Hiss. Ah. The grayish-black smoke flickered a few times. Between disappearing and reappearing, it had even crossed the distance and directly approached the Emperor of the Undersea City. It was unpredictable and formless, but one could see the despair, death, fear, and so on. It was the image of the most terrifying thing in one's heart. I am not easily angered, really, Lewis. The smoke changed, and a pale palm that looked like a claw slowly stretched out at this time. The sharp fingers gently stroked His Majesty the Emperor's cheek. But provoking me is obviously not good for you. Come on, tell me, Lewis, how much do you really know in that awful place? Tell me what that place looks like now. You have been there, right? That place that let you know these secrets. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the courage to provoke me, although I know you are not Carl. The blue light flashed at this moment, and in an instant, the blue crystal-like armor had covered the Emperor of the Undersea City. The light bounced off the thick gray smoke slightly. Do you want to know? His Majesty the Emperor smiled at this time. Maybe if you let me fall into despair, I will be willing to tell you. The holy armor, right? Sin's voice stuttered. I know, I've always known. This is the last thing you can rely on. One day, one of you will wear it and put an end to all of this. This is the source of your hope, and also the hope that you are willing to wait and surrender for such a long time. How beautiful, how dazzling! I have always been waiting for the last fruit to ripen. It is about to ripen, really, I can feel it. Come on, child who has inherited the name of Lewis, use the power of the holy armor to deal with me. I will let you know how powerless this hope is in the end. Then, I will devour the last undersea city. You will feel happiness that you have never felt before. It was like the ravings of a crazy prisoner. If it had a form at this moment, it would probably be a prisoner wearing a prisoner's costume, with the sound of the shackles on his hands and feet. The Emperor of the Undersea City looked at it expressionlessly, and then slowly closed his eyes. The blue light on the holy armor burst out again at this moment, dazzling and dazzling. It was a light that could illuminate the entire huge trench. It was hot and pure at the same time. At this moment, the ceaselessly surging smoke was like a melting ice cube, rapidly melting away. It was ceaselessly forming, yet ceaselessly being annihilated. Sin even moaned in pain, as if it was burned by the flames. This is not the power that the holy armor should have. This is not. Louis, what did you get in that annoying place? What did you get? I am afraid it is something that you will not understand. His Majesty said slowly. In addition, to be exact, this is the power that the holy armor has. For a long time, the hope of countless Lemurians, their guilt day and night, are all here. I just woke them up, that is all. The Titan civilization, the technology of symbiosis between soul and machine, was a technology that he had completely mastered since he got it. In an instant, a huge beam of light was projected from the distant sea. Its source was the huge white tower that had stood in the undersea city for who knew how many years. The blue light evolved into a solid flame, burning on the body of the undersea city emperor. The huge heat had completely dispersed the water in the entire trench in an instant. A special space was formed here, under the sea, but it was indeed a completely dry space, and it was as bright as day. I will. His Majesty's voice sounded faintly, end all of this. You can't do it. Ha 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 ha. You can't do it, Louis. Even if you are 10 times stronger, 100 times stronger, you can't do it. I will not be destroyed by any power. Because I was born from despair. And now let me tell you a fact. You have just turned from a child, who couldn't move me, to a child, who can only move me a little. That is all. The grayish-black smoke erupted wildly in an instant, condensed, and finally, a grayish-black figure appeared in front of the undersea city emperor. It did not have a face, only a pair of cracked eyes and a mouth. It was completely a rough grayish-black shadow. At this moment, the shadow waved his hand and grabbed a black javelin in his palm, and then directly threw it out. The undersea city emperor just happened to dodge it. He had dodged it. However, part of the holy armor on his body directly cracked at this moment. His Majesty's face could not help but become solemn. Are you surprised? Are you feeling uneasy? Are you thinking that you have made countless guesses and even kept raising the assumption of the upper limit of my power, but in the end it was all so laughable? Shadow. Sin laughed with a sharp voice. That's right, Louis. Start panicking. You'll become more delicious because of this. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Perhaps. His Majesty the Undersea City Emperor shook his head at this moment, but it is enough to move you a little. The Undersea City Emperor suddenly made a move at this moment. He directly rushed at Sin, his hands releasing a large amount of blue light, and then weaved into a huge cube, trapping Sin in it. Do you want to trap me with just this? Louis, is this your idea? Sin was deep in the cube and did not panic. It is so fragile, it can't trap me, not here. His Majesty the Emperor said coldly at this moment, and then his body crashed into the cube. Across the cube, the Emperor stared at Sin inside and said in a deep voice, "It is the place where you were born." Could it be? Sin, who was in the cube, suddenly looked down and saw that at the bottom of the trench, a huge door had opened a little without him noticing. Then, the Emperor of the underwater city pushed the cube and quickly slammed it against the door. Dream on. In the cube, a terrifying force suddenly burst out. You are dreaming. I will never go back to that disgusting place again. You are dreaming. The cube was completely shattered at this moment. However, the Emperor of the underwater city suddenly rushed forward at this time. His body, which was burning with blue flames, only hugged this shadow. No! It did not take too long, just a moment. Just this moment of embrace, even if it was immediately broken away, it did not matter. They plunged into the door at this moment. Then, the confined seawater instantly filled up the huge trench, making everything extremely turbid. Chapter 1740. Somewhere in the central tower, in a huge glass container filled with light green liquid, there was a body that was gradually growing, Mr. Kong Hai. A complete eyeball had just formed. Without the protection of any eye skin, the eyeball suddenly started to move, and then it saw a little ladybug that was floating outside the container. Host. Mr. Kong Hai, who had regained consciousness, quickly recognized the ladybug. They did not communicate with each other through language, but through wave signals. I am using the best materials in the central tower to repair your body. Ladybug. The voice of the central tower's host sounded directly in Mr. Kong Hai's consciousness. Don't worry, you will soon regain the ability to move freely. Focus on your recovery. After you are completely repaired, I have one more thing for you to do. Understood. Mr. Kong Hai immediately agreed. But just as the host was about to leave, he suddenly called out to him, Mr. Kong Hai. What is it? The central tower's host asked indifferently. Mr. Kong Hai thought for a moment and said, Why do you look like an insect? It is suitable for me for the time being. The central tower's host said bluntly, This kind of projection is better for hiding the subtle expression of my core on my face. Mr. Kong Hai said, Since you want to hide it, why not just show your voice? There is no need for projection at all. The central tower's voice control system is enough to transmit your voice to anywhere. It was like an interrogation from the soul. The moment Mr. Kong Hai's question popped up, the central tower's host immediately thought, That's right, there's no need for it to project at all. This is a necessary stage of autonomous evolution. The central tower's host replied faintly, Remember, I have enough computing power to support the rationality of all my actions. And you, as a tool created by me, should not have any doubts about me, the creator. Mr. Kong Hai was silent. After a moment of silence, he said in a doubtful tone, I feel that the materials currently repairing my body are not up to the standard of my previous body. Is there any unknown accident in the delivery of the materials? We don't have any more materials. That's all we have. Some of them were even recycled from your remains. There are no accidents. The central tower's host's voice suddenly became sharp. The materials and the formula are like this. The reason why you feel that something is wrong is because your memory center was once damaged, causing your cognition to be in a mess. Remember, you should not doubt me, the creator. If there is a next time, I will deprive you of the ability to think. Understood. I am leaving. You just need to wait here for the repair to be completed, and then wait. The ladybug, which was flying here and there, disappeared just like that. In the container, Mr. Kong Hai's moving eyeball gradually began to form a thin layer of eyelid. Mr. Kong Hai's brain was still thinking. Speculation, this host may have some unknown error. Mr. Kong Hai's host. Rumble. Rumble. This was the sound of bubbles rising from the solution in the container. It should have directly covered Mr. Kong Hai's original consciousness during the recovery. The ladybug thought so, and its main consciousness returned to the interior of Laboratory Number 1. As the central tower's host, as long as there was enough equipment, it could project thousands of images in the central tower or even the entire experimental field. At this time, the ladybug glanced at Boss Luo and Miss Maid, and found that they did not seem to notice that their main consciousness had undergone a switch just now. It felt a kind of reaction that was recorded as reassuring. The central tower's host could not help but think that it was an important step away from perfect evolution into a real life form. In this way, perhaps the real central tower's host had a lot more time to evolve than itself, but perhaps its evolutionary potential was better than the real central tower's host? Before there was accurate data to support this theory, the attitude of seeking the truth that everything was possible was the quality that rigorous science should have. You should have a name. Boss Luo suddenly turned around and smiled. This way, it will be easier to distinguish two different central tower's hosts. The ladybug was not confused at this time, and its strong reaction ability allowed it to answer instantly. Number 1, number 2? This was indeed the style of an incomplete artificial life, formed by a pile of data. Boss Luo smiled and shook his head. How about 7 stars? 7 stars? The ladybug was confused and asked subconsciously, what does this name mean? Boss Luo's voice was magnetic. In the outside world, there is a new civilization. They have divided the stars in the sky. The full name of 7 stars is the Big Dipper. The ancient people used to distinguish the direction and the season according to the different positions of the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper often gives people hope and courage. It is a great star. It sounds pretty good. The ladybug's host said happily, according to the information of the Dragon Phoenix calamity. The humans outside have indeed begun to worship the stars. You are not lying, you are a good guy, I believe you. 7 stars, right? It's just a name, let's call it 7 stars. That's great, you like this new name. Boss Luo smiled slightly, then it was as if the name change had never happened. He looked at Miss Maid and chuckled. His gaze returned to the light screen again. I see it, the train in front. On the advancing Blue Star train, Riaz suddenly shouted in surprise. Everyone looked over and saw that on the exposed section of the track, there was a rather shabby and colorful train. At this time, part of the train had even left the track, and the whole train was bent, almost folding into a piece. This was the Ship of Hope, the relic of the ancestors of the Boulder Kingdom who escaped from the Central Tower. As the current king of the Boulder Kingdom, Mojito could not let the relic of his ancestors be abandoned here for no reason. Stop! Stop right there! Riaz had no choice but to order Tsang Xing to stop the train. We've been away for such a long time. If the combat humanoids of the Central Tower wanted to chase after us, they should have caught up with us a long time ago. According to this King Mojito said, those guys never leave the Central Tower of their own accord. Regarding Riaz's actions, Madame Kaya only said softly, you should be more confident, Riaz, your judgment is not wrong. What is this? Is the kindergarten teacher encouraging a child who is learning arithmetic for the first time? Miss Witch of the Underwater City suddenly muttered in disdain. Madame Kaya pretended not to hear it and said directly, since Master Karen is missing, I think it is necessary to investigate his whereabouts. The Ship of Hope crashed here, and the big beast used to pull it disappeared at the same time. It is very likely that an accident happened. Let's use the Ship of Hope as the center point and try to see if we can find anything. Grouping. Surprisingly, the Witch of the Underwater City requested to be in the same group as Long Gang. In this regard, Long Gang frowned and thought for a moment before agreeing. Helen and Madame Kaya were in the same group. As for Riaz, he could only be in the same group as King Mojito. He looked at the 6-armed, black-furred ape king who could communicate freely with him with a strange expression. He had a bad feeling about this. I heard that you are Iska's grandson? King Mojito immediately lifted Riaz up and put him on his shoulder. Come, I am your Grandpa Mojito. How about I switch with Mother? Madame Karen had already led Helen far away. Riaz subconsciously looked at the combination of Long Gang and Lyoga. They did not move at all and seemed to be rather silent. Thinking about the scene that happened in the cave at the bottom of the lake, Riaz subconsciously patted Mojito's shoulder and whispered quickly, let's go over there and take a look. Sit tight, little guy. King Mojito laughed a few times and jumped directly into the thicket. At this moment, Long Gang looked at the Witch of the Underwater City. I don't think you really plan to be in the same group as me. I think we can be in 2 groups again. So, if you have something to say, just say it. Kaya, is she really your sister? The Witch of the Underwater City asked expressionlessly. Now that things have come to this, there's no need for me to hide it from you. Long Gang shook his head. I don't think I'll be wrong about this. Lyoga directly asked, who is your father? Long Gang frowned. You were once a princess of the royal court and fought in the underwater city. Don't you know the rules of the royal court better than I do? As royalty of the royal court, unless both of our parents are royalty, we won't know where our parents come from. Lyoga lowered her head and did not say anything. You just want to ask this? Long Gang glanced at her in confusion before shaking his head in the end. Our relationship isn't as good as you think. Perhaps when we have the chance to leave this place, we will still be enemies. If there aren't any special circumstances, I don't want to have too much contact with you. Lyoga suddenly raised her head and said softly, Do you think you're the child born here? How do you know? Long Gang's expression could not help but change slightly. This was indeed the conclusion he had reached after discussing it with Master Karen. It was probably the closest to the truth. The problem was that Lyoga was not present when he obtained the scale from the Queen. At the same time, Madame Kaya was not present either. As a result, it was impossible for Lyoga to learn about this from Kaya. You don't need to know how I know. Lyoga smiled. You only need to know one thing, and that is that you are indeed the child born here. Are you sure? Long Gang opened his mouth and asked instinctively, Why are you so sure? The witch of the underwater city sneered. Because I, the former princess of the royal court, your sister Huang in name. That's all I have to say. I won't say it again in the future. It's up to you to believe it or not. Now then, let's split into group. Don't follow me. Wait, explain yourself. Long Gang hurriedly chased after her, but he was unable to catch up to Lyoga now that his blue bloodline had been neutralized. She was the witch of the underwater city, whose blue bloodline had been neutralized as well. I really am the child born here. Long Gang could not help but be stunned. He murmured, Then, who is Prince Yi at this moment? Helen, do you have a family? Madame Karen's voice suddenly rang out by the siren girl's ear. Helen, who was walking briskly, suddenly stopped. Yes, I have 2 older sisters. What about your parents? Helen lowered her head. My parents were killed by the demon hunters. Only my 2 sisters and I are left. What a pitiful child. Madame Kaya patted Helen's shoulder gently. Then, do you like my son, Riaz? Although Helen did not know why Madame Kaya had suddenly asked such a question, she had always dared to face her inner nature as a siren. She immediately gave an affirmative answer. Why would you fall in love with him? Madame Kaya's voice suddenly became much colder. You've only just met. You don't even know each other's past. Do you know him? Do you know what he likes? Perhaps you have some sort of secret that no one knows? Madame Kaya, you perhaps because she was surprised by Madame Kaya's gaze, the siren girl's gaze immediately became rather fearful. I hope you don't mind, Madame Kaya said indifferently. I just don't want my child to be sad because of this in the future. Sirens are a race I've never heard of. They come from the world above. You and Riaz come from different worlds, so I hope you don't blame me for being direct. Do you have the confidence to overcome these difficulties that come from different worlds? I don't know what demon hunters are, but it seems like your parents' deaths were not purely due to revenge. You and your sister need to flee, which means your situation isn't too good. Will this affect Riaz? When the tragedy that happened to your parents happens to Riaz again, will you regret your love for him today? I am not like that. It's not like that. I'm just what? Madame Kaya stared into Helen's eyes. Is it just because of the youthful passion between a young man and a young woman? Or was it just a spur-of-the-moment impulse that he didn't consider the consequences? It doesn't matter which one it is. Are you sure you're prepared? I'll go take a look over there. Helen rushed out from Madame Kaya's side as if she was escaping. Madame Kaya smiled bitterly as she watched the girl run away. She's probably completely hated by now. She shook her head, but at that moment she heard something. Madame Kaya looked over and saw a figure rush into the forest miserably.